Nope. Or the residents' traffic? No, just basically say, committing street. I don't know if you're planning to speak or not.
I'm going to speak for like
Professor
2
Kelly.
seconds, just basically saying I'm here on behalf of the applicant.
Not a very good professor, but a
I'm merely
professor.
here to answer any questions. Yeah. Yeah, this is my sorry.
It'll be up on the clerk's website at some point.
Got it, thanks. Yeah, 'cause I think they submitted actually
We
something.
get on the seal in their file,
Yeah.
so.
No, they all just put all of them.
But just so you can see it.
Yeah.
They get 3%.
Does he hear? Are they, is your
Morning, everybody. We have quorum. I'd like to call this meeting of the North York Community Council to order. Welcome to members of the committee and, of course, members of the public. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 of the Mississauga of the Credit. To all members of the public and, of course, members of council, you can follow the meeting on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at toronto.ca/council. And just a reminder, these sessions are being videotaped. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? None? Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting? Councillor Carroll, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So let's run through the items that are not time specific. Item 7.9, preliminary report, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications, 1100 Shepherd Avenue West. That's my item. I guess I'll move the staff recommendations to organize a community consultation. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 10, preliminary report, zoning bylaw amendment, 2577, 2581 Yonge Street. It's Councillor Robinson. It's also to schedule a community consultation, which I'm sure she has no objection to. So I would have, Councillor Carroll, if you could move the staff recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 11, preliminary report, official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment applications, 2550 Victoria Park Avenue and 246 Lansing Square. Councillor Carroll.
Yep, I'll move the recommendations. The
recommendations for
expanded
community.
Boundaries have been informed.
Recommendations are being moved for community consultation. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 12. Preliminary report, zoning amendment application 765 Steeles Avenue West. Councillor Fillion. Recommendations being moved for community consultation. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 13, preliminary report, official plan amendment, zoning amendment applications 2810, 2814 Bayview Avenue. Councillor Fillion. That item's being held. Item number 14, parking regulations, Tippett Road. That is my ward, and I'll move the staff recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 15, always stop control at Selt Avenue and Mulholland Avenue. Councillor Cole.
I'll move staff recommendations.
Staff recommendations being moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 16, always stop control at Mildenhall Road and Dawlish Avenue. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah,
Staff recommendations being moved
Yeah.
by Councillor Carroll. It's authorizing an always stop control. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 17, parking and traffic regulations, Curlew Drive. Councillor Minawong. Good morning. This is an exciting item. What would you like to do with it?
I know everyone's waiting for it, but I'm happy to.
I was up all night waiting for this item.
All right, I'll move for
Staff recommendations moved for speed reduction. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Number 18, parking amendments, Litzt Gate. Counselor Carroll. I'm
Very
sure-
well pronounced.
Did I get that right?
I'll move the recommendation.
I've never seen a street name like that. Okay, the recommendations are being moved. It's parking prohibitions. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Someone's shoe ringing? Oh. At least there's one person who gets the joke.
Yes, you just showed your age. Mike Cole and I laughed, and that's it.
Item number 19, it's a speed hump poll results, Pineway Boulevard, Counselor Carroll. It's a refusal report.
Yeah, can I hold this one? I have a motion that I want to walk on, not to add speed humps, but to adjust speed, but I don't see it typed up here.
Okay, number 19 is being held. Number 20, traffic control signals, Avondale Avenue at Bales Avenue and Harrison Garden Boulevard. Counselor Fillion. Staff recommendations are moved to authorize installation. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 21, relocation of pedestrian crossover Willowdale Avenue. Counselor Fillion.
I'm moving something other than staff recommendations. Should I do it now as a quick item, or would you like me to hold it?
No, if you have your motion ready, let's get it done.
The motion is to strike out recommendations 2 and 3 and substitute City Council authorize the installation of traffic control signals at the intersection of Willowdale Avenue at Church Avenue. Willowdale Avenue is a minor collector road. Church is part of the service road network. It makes no sense. We're moving one of the old pedestrian crossovers from McKee to Church as Willowdale is being resurfaced. It makes no sense not to make it a traffic control signal. There is a school half a block away, a community center next to that.
Okay, we're going to have to hold the item down.
Okay. It's
It
contrary to
is, yes.
recommendations. Yes.
We do have a motion. I didn't see it on the screen, but yes, it's to
Okay, then
approve
I'll-
the control signals. So we're going to hold 21 down for debate. 22, traffic control signal study, Bathurst and Carpenter, intersection Carpenter Road, Fisherville. It's a walk, I guess it's a motion, a letter from my office. I'm going to move the recommendations. It's to have staff review the safety of this intersection. Review the feasibility of installing traffic control signals. We're asking for staff report.
Oh, okay.
Nothing yet.
Yeah.
Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 23, speed limit reduction on Lord Seton Road. This is Councillor Robinson. I think we should move it, and if she has a problem, then we'll reopen later. But let's dispose of the item. Councillor Carroll, did you want to move these recommendations?
I'll move it despite the fact that it'll require me to slow down.
Oh, you're going 50 on this street?
Occasionally.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 24, Lawrence Park Traffic Management Plan.
Can we hold this down? Because I thought we already did this.
Yes.
I have some questions. I'll have questions.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Vaguely looks familiar. Okay, we'll hold item number 24 down, and hopefully Councillor Robinson will arrive by then. Item number 25, this is in my area. This is Assumption of Services, Menkes Holdings, Inc., 55 Antibes Drive. This was a townhome development, and the city is assuming various services in the area. All those in favor? I'm moving staff recommendations. Opposed? That is carried. Item number 26, Assumption of Services Monarch Corporation. This is 2025 and 2045 Shepherd Avenue East.
Yeah, it's
Counselor
actually,
Carroll.
yeah, it's the road behind it. I'll move the staff recommendations as this road was built in my first term of office.
I really must bring back
Yeah, it's been
great
there a while.
memories, memory lane. Okay, all those in favor, opposed? That is carried. I think we can go start with the timed items and deputants. Item 7.1, final report zoning amendment application, 665, 667, 669, and 671 Shepherd Avenue West. Hanita Braun.
Oh, hello.
Good morning.
Hi, Ms. Braun, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Hanita Braun. I live at 701 Shepherd Avenue West, which is in your ward, Councilor Pasternak. This development really is good because it provides family housing, and this is a family neighborhood. We have a couple of concerns. I live in the condominium building at 701 Shepherd Avenue West, own a unit there with my husband. And there are 2 other people from the same building here with me representing the same issues. And we've also discussed our concerns with the board of directors of the condominium. So what are some of the concerns? Basically have to do with some items related to traffic concerns, traffic issues that currently exist and have been getting worse over the last 3-4 years, basically have to do right now, currently, and that will be exacerbated by this, is the fact that we do not have an advanced left turn lane coming towards Yeoman on Shepherd going west and wanting to make a left turn into Yeoman's. So what happens at rush hour, and has happened many, many times, is that all of the traffic going east on Shepherd wants to make it through a yellow light, and none of the left turners can make it. They actually obstruct the lane. And that has been getting worse and worse. It is really bad during the winter. It is equally bad in the summer. And the worst hours that I have observed are really between 4:30 and 6:30. So that is a situation that is bad now, has been aggravating for the past 3-4 years, and will be getting worse. Another issue that I want to raise with regards to the proposed development is the way that, I mean, logically it may make sense, but when looking at the current situation, how it's going to be aggravated, it may not make sense, is that the driveway coming out from 701 Shepherd Avenue West, the vehicular driveway, is being lined up with this development access driveway, vehicular driveway. Which may make sense in sort of looking at a plan, but it does not make sense in terms of the current situation on Yeoman's. What the current situation on Yeoman's is that the segment of it on Yeoman's between Alexis and Shepherd has parking on both sides, and the road is already very narrow. So in the winter, it's very, very bad to get traffic, at least one lane of traffic going in either direction. And equally in the summer. That is going to be greatly exacerbated when there is another project with another exit there. So we have difficulty now turning left into Yeoman's and turning right into our development. And our neighbors across the street in this new development will have the reverse issue, but the same issue. And the third problem that I want to raise is the fact that during construction, because of all of these issues, during construction, this project should not take over Yeoman Street for construction. It should be self-contained within its site. That would be a real concern. So having said all these things, and given the fact that this has a holding, an H on it because of issues to do with servicing, I want to bring this to your attention, and I'd like to know that this will be looked into and addressed since there is some time, and hopefully we at 701 Shepherd Avenue West will hear about remedies that are being made, but the first one that can be made right away, because in fact the stoplight at Yeomans and Shepherd has the space in it for an advanced left from Shepherd into Yeomans. That will be the first thing to deal with right now, and it would alleviate our situation immediately with regards to this one particular point. Thank you for your attention.
Very well, thank you very much. I just have a couple of questions for clarity so we can work on this traffic situation. But do any other members have questions for the deputants? No? So the advanced green at Yeomans and Shepherd, I'm familiar with that intersection. Are you talking about westbound traffic?
That's right.
turning
Westbound on Shepherd, making a left turn into Yeomans
to Yeomans?
to come into our driveway to our building.
Right. And your request is an advanced green?
That's right. And so if we have that, it's actually going to alleviate the issue that the traffic going east on Shepherd would not be rushing to make the intersection and stop in the middle.
Right. No, I know it's a very busy intersection because you've got enormous east-west flow, and then
Right.
you've got
Right.
north-south flow.
Yeah.
And
It needs to be looked in more seriously at this point, because we have been seeing an increase in this problem for us, and it definitely is going to be exacerbated with this proposed development.
So my second question is, you mentioned construction of the townhomes, and you're worried that this could disrupt activity on Yeomans?
Well, actually, what happens very often is that you've got construction trucks, you've got concrete trucks lining up on the street. Sometimes they even take a part of the road for delivery of materials. And what I'm saying is that given the current situation, the construction of this project has to be self-contained within their lands, within their property, not take over the sidewalk and the street
Right, understood. Okay,
on Yeomans, yeah.
right. Okay, I read you loud and clear. Those are very valid comments. I'm going to be talking with our transportation team to see what we can do about studying a potential left-hand turn advanced. And of course, with every construction project, there is a construction safety management plan that has to be approved.
Yeah.
And we also can enforce the bylaws as far as idling, as far as starting work before the bylaw requirements, and there's ways to enforce that. So I thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you, Councillor.
I don't have any other deputants listed on this item. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak to 7.1? It's the zoning amendment application for 665, 667, 669, and 671 Shepherd Avenue West. Then I would move, questions for staff, sorry. Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, just some questions. Well, probably Councillor Pasternak was going to ask this. Was the issue of an advanced green looked at as part of the traffic study? Do we have recollection of that?
Through the chair, no, I'm not aware of that. I would assume so. If this development is impacting traffic patterns at that intersection, I would assume so.
Yeah, because there are a fair amount of parking spots, and it's stacked town, so we anticipate cars. There'd be at least a car per unit.
Through the chair, yes, I believe so.
Okay. My other question is about the construction plan. This is stacked townhouses, and at this point, I think every member of community council has one of those somewhere or other. How much construction disruption is reasonable when we're not going high rise here? It's a low rise structure, stacked towns. Can they keep it all on site? It's a fairly large site.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as noted earlier, there will be a requirement for a construction management plan.
Yeah.
The site is quite large, so in terms of phasing construction on site, I imagine that the majority of the construction staging will be on site. But as in every construction site, there might be the requirement for some sort of permitting required for boulevard access for construction. It really depends on their plan in terms of where they're going to get access from, whether it's Shepherd or Yeoman's.
Yeah.
We've yet to see the construction management plan, but I think given the concern and the sensitivity surrounding that, that's something that we can work with the applicant and the counselor to make sure there's as little disruption as possible.
Okay, so if you're going to work with the applicant, I don't think I need to make a motion, but this would be a great test site for all the ones that are coming forward like this. If the conversation can be had, the frustration that I find residents have when it's townhouse construction is once they do fill the site with all the townhouse built for them, then there is an endless period of time where skilled trades are just scattering every street around it, because it's the finishing that goes on and on and on and on. And that tends to be sort of, it's sort of post-construction plan almost. They tend to get really lax at that point, because the big volume trucks, the foundation is gone and all that. But there are a bazillion light delivery trucks everywhere in the neighborhood, because that's, they're all coming in single vehicles. So if that could be discussed, I think it would go a long way to dealing with this small neighborhood street that's sort of right beside a major artery. They're obviously they're gonna park on the neighborhood streets. It's what's happening in the area on the south side of Shepherd over in my area right now. And it tends to happen in the townhouse developments. There's then this giant supply of small vehicles everywhere, because every construction, they can't carpool for some reason. So if that could be the undertaking, I don't think you need a motion, just a commitment from staff that they'll address that in the construction plan? Oh, okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I have a couple questions, but anyone else, any other councillors have questions for staff? Regarding the holding provision, is that all along Shepherd from Bathurst to Allen Road?
No, in this particular case, it's just for this site at this point.
Aren't there other applications along Shepherd that are also subject to this holding provision?
There's other applications that we're considering whether to apply a holding provision or not. I'm not aware, was there any others that we applied?
There are a number of applications along this corridor and we know that there are servicing constraints. We've been approaching them right now on a site-by-site basis, but we have discussed with our colleagues in ECS about whether or not it would be appropriate to do a holding provision along the corridor. I can only recall now that we've done 2 in the area with a holding provision. There are a couple that are before the tribunal as well.
So these, I guess there's several applicants along Shepherd that have asked whether they could work together to meet the sanitary servicing solution. In other words, work on a joint project for upgrade of sanitary. Are staff engaged in that way to make that happen, to make sure they could proceed on a cost-shared basis?
Yeah, my understanding is they are speaking to our manager of engineering construction services, and if they were to come forward with a solution and a plan that is satisfactory to ECS, then that may be a route to front-ending some servicing upgrades.
Okay. All right, that's all from me. Anyone else? Questions for staff? Any speakers? Did you want to move the record? Oh, you want to speak?
Yeah, just briefly, the reason I was asking the question, hearing the resident loud and clear, I think this is going to be a challenge all along, anywhere we're doing Transit Avenue development, along Eglinton when the crosstown is done, and along Shepherd now, including into Shepherd East. This has become the clarion call that in the construction management plan, we address beyond heavy vehicles and have parking regulations and a management plan all the way to the end of construction, because that second stage of construction after the large vehicles, where they tend to start to disregard the plan we've made, and we end up relying on the police and wasting their time to get enforcement. So I ask those questions. I'm hoping that staff will undertake to really make a difference here and establish a pattern going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other speakers? No? Okay, I guess, Councillor Carroll, did you want to move the recommendations, or?
Sure, I'll move them for you, Councillor Pasternak.
Okay, recommendations are moved on item 7.1. All those in favor?
Okay.
Opposed?
Yeah.
That is carried, and this item does go to council, so we'll be able to work on some fine tuning between now and council.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if we could go back to 13 and
Item 13, 2810, 2814 Bayview Avenue.
Yeah, it's just a prelim report. So I'll be moving the staff recommendations, but want to add an additional one that reads as follows. Due to the proximity of the site to the 401 ramp, that the appropriate city staff in their review of this application consider eliminating all parking if the access is off Irvington Avenue, or greatly reducing the parking to allow access off Bayview. And that's simply because the site is practically at the 401 ramp, and it's going to be really difficult to get approval to put it that closely. One solution would be to greatly reduce the number of parking spots, and therefore the number of cars going in and out. So that's just for staff to have a look at that.
Okay, is that amendment ready? Does anyone want to see it? Oh, does anyone want to see that, or are they okay with it the way it was presented verbally? Okay, we'll hold that item down for a minute.
Francine,
Councillor
just
Minawong,
putting-
you had something?
Francine?
Yeah, you'll have to wait till 11:30 for that item. We're waiting for the motion. We want to vote on the motion, but I think people want to see it. Oh, oh, was it up there? And while we're waiting, Councillor Robinson, we moved a few of your items. If you...
That's fine. I understand one wasn't moved, but I'm just going to check on it.
Okay.
I just have to check on that, so I'm doing that right now. Thank you.
Is that a building without parking? That's a building with no parking spots?
Possibly. It's not.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's interesting, all right. I always like creative thinking. Okay, the motion is on the screen. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We can go back to item 2, 9:45 timed item. I don't have any deputants. It's Councillor Fillion. Questions for staff? Counselor Fillion? Oh, sorry. Yeah. No
I
question.
was on. I'll move the staff
Okay,
recommendation.
staff recommendations, move. I'm sorry, I thought maybe you were considering some questions for staff. So, item 7.2, final report, official plan amendment, zoning amendment, 160 Shepherd Avenue West. The local councilors move staff recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 3, final report zoning bylaw amendment, application 11 to 19, 2529 Industrial Street. This is Councillor Robinson.
Are there any deputations on this one?
Forgive me, we do have one. I think it's
Okay.
the applicant,
Is-
Joshua Butcher.
Is Jeff Cattell here? He sent in a letter yesterday. Okay.
Mr. Butcher? Great, thanks very much. You have 5 minutes.
Yep. Good morning. My name's Joshua Butcher. I'm a planner with Bousfields, and we're the planning consultants to First Capital Realty, the owner and applicant behind this rezoning application to expand the Leaside Village Shopping Center. We have reviewed the staff report. We agree with all the recommendations, and I'm just merely here to answer any questions that may arise for the applicant on this rezoning application. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That was concise. Any questions for the deputant, who is also the applicant? No?
So,
Question-
I don't have any questions, do you?
Questions
Yeah,
for
go
staff,
ahead.
anybody? Councillor Carroll?
Well, just the resident group that, they sent a letter as opposed to a deputation. And their main issue is whether or not this is core employment lands and whether or not they were designated and savable. I'm taking it this is under old rules. Were these designated employment lands?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they are designated employment lands. However, there was a site-specific policy that applied to this land in particular that allows the retail uses, as we've had in some cases, and this
Right.
was a result of a settlement under OPA 231.
Yeah.
So this application is a zoning bylaw amendment to bring the zoning in conformity with the official plan policies.
Right, so the zoning bylaw amendment is to amend employment lands to this, but it's based on that earlier agreement that in this strip. That's how this came to be.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for staff? Any speakers?
Yes, I would actually like to move this forward to council without recommendation. I'll just tell you why. I did get some correspondence from the Leaside Residents Association yesterday. They had indicated earlier they were concerned about it. So I just want a little bit more time to talk to the parties about this, including the Leaside Business Park, who also expressed concern, but have also kind of given up, quite frankly, on their employment lands. Like literally, they're beyond exasperated about the creep into that neighborhood, which is basically heavy industrial. And these various developments keep happening on the edge of that area. And then they come and they complain about the trucks and they complain about the noise and some of the smells, which are all regulated. And they try to be very careful, but it is an industrial park. So I feel their pain. And I would just like another couple weeks to just talk to the parties again and then make some decisions at City Council, if that would be all right with this body. Or I could defer it. I could also just defer it, but then deferring it takes it to quite a stretch, right? September.
September.
So it might be better for this, for us to just give me a couple more weeks to work on with the parties. It's really up to this body.
Well, Councillor Robinson, we feel your pain. It is your choice whether you want to defer to the next community council meeting or send it up to.
Yeah, it is. That's why I said. I think it's quite a stretch for the. I think it's late September or 4 months.
September 16th.
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll just send it on to council, and if that's all right, without recommendation, and then I'll have time to speak to the parties again.
Okay, item 3, move to council without recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 4, draft report, draft plan, common elements, condominium part lot, control exemption, applications, 2962. Do I have to read this whole thing? Councillor Filling, what would you like to do with item 4?
I would like to move it. There is also an item that needs to be added to the agenda that's related to this site.
Oh,
I
okay.
believe.
Do you want to hold it down then? Which item?
Well, no,
There's a walk
okay, no, let's do them separately. Francine's giving me a look, so I always take my instructions from Francine.
All
So
right.
I'll just move the staff recommendations on this one and then add the item separately.
I should slow down a bit. Were there any questions to staff on this item? From councillors? This is item 4. Bayview Avenue. Any questions for staff? Any speakers? I don't have any deputants on the list. Any deputants for item 4, Bayview Ave? All right, maybe you want to get a coffee or something? Oh, you have a property in the area, okay. And there's some paperwork to fill out. Councillor Filling, you're moving staff recommendations? Okay, staff recommendations are being moved on item 4. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 5, 10:15, okay, we're right on time. Final report, rental housing demolition application, 2779 to 2781 Young Street, 1517 and 1921 Strathgowan Avenue, Strathgowan. Councillor, questions for staff?
I guess, obviously, like, there's tenants still in there, so is that going to be addressed, or, like, there's people living there? That's my impression.
Through the chair, yes, there are a number of tenants that are still on site, yes.
And so how do you demolish, given that circumstance?
So demolition can only occur after a number of preliminary conditions have been satisfied, one of which is an agreement that's registered on title, tenant assistance, and the buildings would also need to be vacant.
Okay, so this kind of gets the ball rolling, but it doesn't happen immediately.
This gets the ball rolling, allows the city to enter into an agreement, register on title. Once the agreement's registered on title, then the notice can be issued to the tenants themselves.
Okay. All right. I guess I have to approve it. I can't.
I just have one question for staff.
Yeah, well, I believe, has a relocation been negotiated for these tenants?
A tenant assistance plan has been negotiated. It has been
All of them?
for all of the existing tenants, and some assistance has actually been provided to past tenants as well.
Okay, because they didn't have the nicest time. It was all over the media, you'll recall. Okay, so I guess I'll approve it. I guess we will, I will suggest that we move staff recommendations.
Just one quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we move it to staff. 2 meetings have been held. On the first meeting in March of 2015, so it was a while ago, 10 tenants showed up. And then the second meeting in November of 2017, 7 tenants showed up. Are these numbers reflective of who's actually in those buildings?
So as of, through your chair, so as of the date of drafting this report, I believe there are 4 tenants left in the buildings.
That's it?
That's it.
Well, because there was no heat or water, so
There's no heat or water. Well, that's
it was all over.
that's one way to get tenants to move.
In the middle of
Okay.
the winter, so it's not the greatest place to live when you're treated like that.
My gosh. Okay. Councillor Carroll.
So now I'm really unclear. this is a demolition to facilitate a development. There will be a loss of rental units. Has a rental relocation, has it all been negotiated for the tenants, past and present, according to the rental relocation policy?
Through the chair, the recommendations for approval do outline all of the conditions of approval.
Right.
There's the replacement of the 28 existing rental units on site. We're securing the tenure, securing the rents, and then a tenant assistance plan to the satisfaction of the chief planner.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carroll. Okay, we have the recommendations in front of us. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 10:15 item, 7.6. We have deputant request for direction report zoning bylaw amendment application 368 to 386 Eglinton Avenue East. Pittman Patterson. Toronto Lands Corporation. TDSB. TDSB.
Yes, good morning, Chair and councillors. My name is Pittman Patterson. I'm external legal counsel to Toronto Lands Corporation, which is a subsidiary of TDSB, as you may know, responsible for all real estate, land use planning, and other similar matters. TLC submitted a letter of concern on this item to Community Council dated June the 20th, expressing concern with approval of the ZBA for this site on the basis of insufficient space in local schools to accommodate students anticipated from growth in the Midtown area. City staff recommended that Council direct legal staff to attend at the LPAT to support approval subject to a number of conditions, and those conditions would have the LPAT withhold its order until the conditions are satisfied. The TLC letter of June the 20th sets out specific wording for a holding symbol, an H, on the zoning bylaw for this site, and the conditions under which the H would be lifted, with the goal of addressing the accommodation concern. Yesterday, City staff advised TLC of its desire to further discuss the conditions of approval proposed by TLC. While the TLC believes that the conditions of approval it has suggested in its letter are appropriate, TLC has agreed to work further with city legal and planning staff to determine the appropriate conditions of approval pertaining to accommodation. Therefore, TLC respectfully requests that Community Council and ultimately Council provide the following direction. So there was a request in the letter, and I'm replacing it with the following request. That City Council direct the city solicitor and appropriate city staff to continue to work together with the Toronto District School Board to secure appropriate conditions of approval, including potentially a holding symbol, H, regarding the provision of public school facilities to accommodate students generated from this development. This direction would enable further discussion on the appropriate approval conditions to address accommodation before the parties attend at the LPAT to deal with potential approval of the ZBA. This direction, if recommended by Community Council and given by Council, would be entirely consistent with the July 2018 resolution of Council, which read as follows. City Council directs city staff to work together with the TDSB as appropriate in the context of LPAT tribunal hearings for development applications in the Young Secondary Plan area and the Toronto District School Board's ongoing accommodation review in order to secure appropriate conditions of approval regarding the provision of educational facilities on a site-by-site basis. TLC is diligently participating in as many LPAT proceedings as possible regarding Midtown development application appeals in order to consistently address the cumulative impact of development in the area on school accommodation. Community Council and Council are certainly aware of the context for this engagement. Significant intensification and population growth is presenting serious accommodation challenges within a catchment area that is already over capacity. The cumulative student yield of this growth is hundreds of elementary and secondary school students, and those yields do not even account for the province's recent changes to OPA 405, the Midtown Plan, which will permit even greater intensification. In the longer term, a new elementary school will be needed in Midtown. In the shorter term, TDSB must find accommodation in existing facilities where possible. Finding accommodation in the shorter term may involve a mix of physical improvements, school boundary changes, and programming changes, all of which is being studied now. The TDSB has commenced the Young Eglinton Phase 2 Program Area Review, or PAR, a process that requires study of options in light of known and anticipated development applications, public input, and ultimately, Board of Trustees approval. The TLC seeks to align implementation of changes approved through the PAR process with the timing of development so as to resolve accommodation deficiencies to the extent possible short of a new school. The provision of adequate school facilities in a manner that is coordinated with the granting of approvals for development is what provincial policy requires and what the city's official plan recognizes is essential to providing complete communities. Accordingly, the TLC respectfully requests that Community Council support the resolution requested at the outset of my deputation, and I'd be pleased to repeat that request if that would be helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. We have questions for the deputant, Councillor Robinson, and then Councillor Carroll.
Thank you very much. Really happy to see you here. I had an application last week that went to council. I hope that you'll still keep your eye on that one as it goes through the process. That was 110 Broadway. So I'll just get that little plug in now. I went to a meeting the TDSB held in the fall in the kind of the Thorncliffe Park area. That was the venue, but they were really focusing on Yonge and Eglinton, Davisville Village, and Leaside, and talking about the strain on the system at capacity or over capacity in the schools, particularly at Yonge and Eglinton, but all those neighborhoods really in trouble. And it was done by your planners, and they did an excellent job of the presentation. But as Matt Lowe and Cole and I have spoken about multiple times at council and committee, yes there is, Yonge and Eglinton is completely under, like over
Councillor
capacity.
Robinson, you have a question?
Okay, so you're here simply because Yonge and Eglinton, through Midtown and Focus and these planning exercises, what we've discovered and your projections for looking forward is really there's no capacity at Yonge and Eglinton at all at this time or going forward.
That is correct, through the chair. The schools now cumulatively are over capacity, and there's a process that has to be completed to shuffle things around, if I can put it that way, to squeeze as many students as possible in existing facilities. And the process for obtaining a new school in the area is a long one and an uncertain one in terms of dealing with the province.
Okay, and at that session, they were very open and transparent about the John Fisher effect, I call it. And that really was symbolic of many things when a 35-story tower was approved beside a very small grade school. My understanding from the staff at that presentation is that really you're here now partially because of the John Fisher experience, and so that really inspired these policies that the TDSB is now an active partner when developments are popping up and there's capacity issues. Is that correct?
Through the chair, in part, Fisher involves impacts on the school facility from adjacent development. It's something of a separate issue from the overall accommodation question. What's really driving my attendance here today and the TLC's participation both in appeals at the LPAT and the application process is simply the overcapacity issue. Not every school will have a development compatibility concern like Fisher does, but for sure, every application in the Midtown area and the Davisville area is raising the capacity issue.
Okay, thank you very much for coming today.
All right, thank you, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Carroll, and then Councillor Cole.
Yeah, I'm just interested, in your deputation, you say you sent letters, have copies of the letters, but did you register as a party to this LPAT?
Yes, through the chair, we have obtained party status in this particular LPAT proceeding and in 10 others in the young Eglinton area.
Okay, so, and that's in that area, but is that becoming the policy? Is the board or TLC, either the corporation or the board, going to have a policy now, and are there staff now that we're going to start to register as parties wherever there isn't school capacity?
The focus right now, through the chair, the focus right now is on what I would call the hot spots. So certainly young Eglinton, the Davisville area, High Park is another hot spot where there's such a high concentration of growth that capacity simply cannot keep up. So it's a multi-pronged effort by TLC to intervene in the problem, not only at LPAT proceedings, but also in the application process, and even earlier in the city's various policy planning processes.
So were the hotspots discussed with the board? The reason I'm asking, because my ward has most of the Shepherd subway in it, and where we've asked the board to become a party to hearings, whether LPAT system or OMB, today we're looking at this is 76 additional units. I had 600 additional units and couldn't get the board to register to be a party, despite multiple urgings by myself and the community planner. So is this a new policy? And can we look forward to you responding wherever we say you don't have capacity and you better become a party to this hearing and negotiate something and send the message to the province? Is that the future here?
Well, certainly since, through the chair again, certainly since the TLC took on the land use planning mandate last fall, there has been very much,
so that's
policy
the change.
of engaging.
That's the change. So that now all shifts to TLC and not the board?
The land use planning function has shifted, yes.
So going forward, is it the intention of TLC to have ongoing communications with the various planning offices, not just North York?
Yes, very much so. Through the chair, there is certainly an intention to have communication with all of the offices. There is a program of ongoing discussion with city planning around the accommodation issue. There have been a number of information sessions held with city planning and legal around the accommodation problem, the sorts of conditions of approval that TLC would be looking for to deal with those problems. And the TLC will also be having information sessions with the councillors and trustees over the summer. Those will be set up to also provide more technical detail around the accommodation issues. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, so I just have one more question. It's kind of a big loaded question. I hope you'll indulge me, Mr. Chair. Can it be made clear in that exercise? Because it's crystal clear to councillors, but I do not think it is clear to trustees that there is no point in us fighting each other at this point when you have a province that reintroduces the OMB, pulls apart Midtown and Focus after all the work that has been done, that your corporation is going to have to always have the resources to register as a party and drive the point home to the appointees of the province. Because we actually don't, in our planning regime, we don't actually have the toolkit to refuse a development on the basis of school capacity. We need a whole bunch of other reasons to do that. But going to the party and having additional parties at every hearing, now the new OMB, to drive the point home and be negotiating directly to that province and to that developer is really the way forward. And is that going to be clear to the trustees so that they do their politicking at the right government?
Through the chair, The engagement of TLC in the planning process, as I've described, is in accordance with Board of Trustees' direction. They're fully informed of what is unfolding. I'll respectfully disagree with you in terms of having the planning tools. We believe there are the policy hooks in both provincial policy and the city's official plan to hold up development on the basis of insufficient capacity in schools. It hasn't yet been tested in a hearing at the tribunal, so we'll see where that goes. But I certainly agree that it is the TLC mindset that we need to work together with the city on this problem.
Well, read that Bill 108 carefully.
Thank you for that advice, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Cole.
Thank you for your very important deputation. Just for the record, what is the Toronto Lands Corporation?
It's a wholly owned subsidiary of the TDSB that has the mandate to deal with all real estate matters, so dispositions, acquisitions, leasing, and land use planning.
Okay, thank you for that. Has the school board or the Toronto Lands Corporation issued a report based on the significant changes passed down by the province lately, Bill 108 and the overriding of the Midtown and Focus Plan and the Downtown Core Plan? Have you responded to that in any written form?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of an official response from TLC yet on Bill 108 or OPA 405. Frankly, I think the changes to OPA 405 are still being digested and will have to be considered in terms of the program area review, both the one ongoing and future reviews. It's a constantly moving cycle of reviews.
And the other question is, in terms of capacity in schools, I know in the past you've had signs up at construction sites, right? Are you still engaged in posting those signs on new development sites through the school board?
So through the chair, are you referring to signs that say you may not have your children accommodated in the local school? I believe we are. I'll just check with my colleagues. They're nodding yes. And that historically has sometimes been as far as the school board would go. But now, with the intense capacity issues, it's not enough to simply say you may not be accommodated in the local area.
So you may have to go further than just issuing the signs in order to alert potential residents of the fact is there isn't going to be capacity in a school. What else could you do?
Well, in the past, the TLC has, or TDSB has used warning clauses, has required warning clauses in the various agreements that residents of a new development would sign. But now the TLC is involved in the development approval process from the outset. I don't know that that filters through to residents if the development is ultimately approved, but the goal of the TLC is to ensure that the timing of development approvals is better aligned with the provision of the infrastructure.
Yeah, and I just wondering whether it would help you in your efforts to alert the public to the fact is that when they buy a condo, especially in the young Eglinton area, young Davisville area, that there won't be accommodation available. And I mean, would it help if, like, I'm considering the city issuing a similar sign or posting a similar sign in all future developments in the young Eglinton area, like as Councillor Robinson said, where we might say, a warning, you can't get on the subway in the morning, you have to wait for 6 subway cars, there's no parks in this area, traffic is horrible, and just be careful before you buy a condo in those condo crush areas of the city. Would that help perhaps in getting the message across to people, especially in light of Bill 108, which basically, and ripping up of Midtown Focus, we're going to get so many applications, never mind the John Fisher OMB application. So would that help you if we perhaps started posting our own signs about warning people, don't buy a condo in these areas, or else don't complain to us after the fact that there's traffic, there's no parks, and I can't get my kid into school. So would that help you in your efforts to basically educate the public about what's happening with this condo crush?
Through the chair, I think the TLC would be interested in coordinating with the city on the appropriate public messaging. The specifics as to what accommodation might be available in what school in the Midtown area generally will be a product of the PAR process that's now ongoing. But that's going to take a number more months to reach the Board of Trustees level. And then it's a process of implementing the outcome of the approved program area review. Once there's an approved review in hand and we know what the operational changes are, what the programming changes are, then I think would be the appropriate time to work on messaging.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. I have a couple of questions, unless any of the councillor has questions. So just very briefly, when I left the school board, the TDSB, about 8 years ago, there were 100 schools that were half empty. Is that no longer the case?
I couldn't answer that, sir. I don't know the board-wide stats.
So I guess in the 8 years I've been here, although some days it feels a lot longer, I don't think we've had, I think maybe we've had one person from the TDSB come and depute. You may be the second or third person. There just didn't seem be any interest in our planning files. And rarely do we get any correspondence. And I'm looking at your letter now. I mean, it's the only letter I can really remember ever receiving in the last 8 years. There just didn't seem to be any interest from the TDSB. Is that changing?
Certainly, sir, since I've been engaged over the last 2 years, there's been quite active involvement. I think you would find there have been a number of written and oral submissions to community councils, both here and in the High Park area. So whatever the past status might be, absolutely there's an active engagement now. The TLC has sought party status in every LPAT proceeding it reasonably can, sometimes jumping in the middle of a proceeding, which is not easy. And it's certainly monitoring all of the applications in the Midtown and Davisville area going forward, and will intervene as it can.
So when we established the Toronto Lands Corporation when I was there, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was to dispose of non-performing assets, real estate assets, I guess empty schools, and other vacant properties that were costing the TDSB money. And the funds derived from that were to be put into a capital fund to build capacity in high-stress areas. Is that no longer the philosophy of the TLC?
I couldn't tell you, sir, what the philosophy is in terms of use of funds from disposition. Certainly, one of the concerns of the TLC is getting ministry approval for capital funds for new schools. And that is a process that sees the board in competition with all the other boards across the province, and there is a lot of competition.
So just very quickly, there was at one point a provincial fund, although I guess it's gone under the current administration, that if you could prove that a school was in such a poor state of good repair that was basically dilapidated, you could tap this fund for the building of a new school. It was, it was a $25–50 million fund. Is that fund still available for you to build capacity?
I'll just check with my colleagues. They may have a yes, no. Okay, we're not sure, sir.
And finally, when we receive an application here, let's say for just making a case of, let's say 500-unit condo, combination of a 1, 2, 3-bedroom, maybe some bachelor studio, how do you know how many school-age kids will actually be living there at the end of the day?
That's a process that TDSB has been engaging in for many years, as I'm sure you know, sir, where they look at past experience from developments and the yields from those, and they look at future demographics, who is in the area generally, who's anticipated to come into the area, and they use that demographic information to generate yield factors on a fairly geographically specific basis throughout the city. So it is a projection, but it's a well-informed projection.
Okay. Any other questions for the deputant? Great, thank you very much. It was an important discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, questions for staff?
Yeah, I just want to speak.
No? Speakers?
So I have a motion to move.
Okay.
If we could put that on the screen and then council can see it. Basically, what we're recommending is that we approve the staff report along with this amendment. And the amendment is that we direct the city solicitor and appropriate city staff to continue to work with the TDSB to secure appropriate conditions of approval, including potentially a holding symbol H, regarding the provision of public school facilities to accommodate students generated from this development. So that's my motion. That was written by the city lawyer, and the planners are on board with this, and my understanding is the TDSB has also reviewed this motion and are also comfortable with it. So my understanding is all parties are on board with this motion. I would just say that I'm very happy to see the Toronto Lands Corp here, thrilled actually. I feel this is long overdue. And I do have to refer back to John Fisher and what we went through on that development when the TDSB decided not to register as a party. And the city was left kind of holding the bag, even though it was basically on top of a school. A very precious school, quite frankly, a wonderful school, French language school in our city. So we heard from the Toronto Lands rep that maybe partially John Fisher influenced their participation, but my understanding from the TDSB planners is it very much has influenced their decision to now register as a party as they see fit, particularly in the young Eglinton area, where my colleagues have heard it over and over again about the infrastructure issues, challenges, the lack of green space, the lack of community centers, libraries, parks, fire stations, whatever you want to choose, there's a lack of it there. My biggest beef is the two things, the lack of green space, because that makes neighborhoods livable, but also transit. And as the chair of the TTC, I've worked collaboratively with many stakeholder groups, including Sarah, which is the South Eglinton Residents Association. They're here today. Andy Gort's in the audience. And he's on board with both the motion, all the motions before us today, representing a very broad, group of residents. But this association's done a lot of work on assessing transit, particularly at Yonge and Eglinton, now and in the future. And it's when you look at the map of what's coming, there's a lot being built at Yonge and Eglinton, but what's coming is frightening, literally terrifying. And Councillor Cole and I face this on a day-to-day basis, the challenges at Yonge and Eglinton. And the recent news of Bill 108, coupled with now, even to me more devastating, is the Midtown in Focus plan being ripped up. And I think that's a quote from Councillor Cole, literally being ripped up and thrown to the curb. After years of investment and work and evenings and weekends, it's quite unsettling what's happening at Yonge and Eglinton. So I hope you'll support this motion and support all the parties that have been involved in this. I would say to the TDSB, last week I was struggling with a very aggressive development at 120 Broadway, about 800 units, and I wished you had been at the table on that. But I'm happy to see you this week at the table, and I hope you'll keep your eye on that application. I will be in touch with you about that. I could go on forever about capacity issues and infrastructure issues at Yonge and Eglinton, but I will wrap up by saying that this is we're at a crisis level, and with the recent news from the province, that's just, you know, this is a crisis level on steroids. So this is very important. We, you know, we move this along, but at the same time, work with the TDSB to review this, whether it's the planners, our city solicitor, and myself as a local councillor with local residents associations who are very active and engaged, and thank goodness for that, because they do a terrific job. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Any other speakers? Councillor Cole?
Thank you. Councillor Robinson got me going again here. Talked about steroids, and really what we have here is a city on steroids. I mean, if you try to walk as a pedestrian at Yonge and Eglinton, it is a risky business. And in fact, we've had to station crossing guards at Yonge and Eglinton to try and get people safely across the street. Never mind children. These are adults that are in danger every day if they try to cross that intersection with the construction of the Eglinton Crosstown, the condo construction that's taking place all up and down Yonge Street and along, and more to come. So I think this is a very timely deputation. I totally support Councillor Robinson's motion. And I just think, you know, as certain parts of the city, and it doesn't happen everywhere, and I mean, if you're fortunate enough to live in part of the city where there isn't this condo crush, it's wonderful. But if you are one of the residents that lives there already, and then you're told that there isn't enough condo building taking place at Yonge and Eglinton, that we're told by the province we're going to have to basically double and triple that. How is that going to be a place to live? And as Councillor Robbins said, we're short of libraries, school capacity we talked about, green space. We had a meeting last night for the revitalization of Eglinton Park. The Eglinton Community Center, the North Toronto Community, was packed with people all fighting over this small little park we have at Yonge and Eglinton. They wanted soccer, baseball, dog park, splash pad, and you know, we've got wall-to-wall people there now, and then we're expecting another 40,000 people moving into that area, all fighting over this little poster-sized park at Yonge and Eglinton. So that's really a harbinger of things to come. It's, you know, it's like the Hunger Games. That's what's coming to Toronto. Because in the new provincial edicts, there's no money for parks, no libraries. The community help that went towards paying for some of these facilities is gone. Section 37, Section 42, they're gone. And so people, I know, will say, like last night, when people come to the meeting, they weren't very concerned about the Midtown Unfocused Plan. They weren't concerned when Bill 108 came into play. So now they come to public meetings and say, why don't we have more parks? And they don't understand the connection between planning decisions made by the city and the residents, like as Andy Gord and others have worked for 6 to 8 years on a local plan that was ripped up. And everybody sits there and says, oh, those are just the NIMBYs. Well, the NIMBYs, to take a look at Yonge and Eglinton, I think they just approved on the, I guess that's on Josh Matlow's side, on the corner there, there's about a 65-story building that just went up, amongst the others. So we are in a real, as Councillor Robbins said, we are in a real crisis crunch here. And the rest of the people of Toronto better wake up to what's happening to our city, because essentially we have lost planning control not only of our neighborhoods, we've lost planning control of the necessary public investments in our neighborhoods. They're going to disappear. So you can have all the concrete condos you want, but if there isn't a park for your dog to pee in, what good is it having all these condos, never mind your children, that sit there and enjoy a little bit of grass once in a while, because the city's becoming totally vertical in certain parts. And that is not a good place to live when you have nothing but vertical concrete towers everywhere with no parks, no libraries, and you can't get on the transit. And please don't complain about traffic if you move into one of those areas, because you can see what the traffic is there now. So anyways, maybe we're going to have to look at, as I said, our own signs about saying, beware, buyer, what you're going to get if you buy that beautiful 400-foot, closet in the sky on Yonge and Eglinton. Beware, buyer. Thank you.
Thank you for that dystopian talk. Gosh. I move out of the city. Any other speakers? Okay, no more speakers. Councillor Robinson, do you want to move the staff recommendations?
Yeah, we actually have a motion on the.
Oh, sorry, yes, we'll vote on that first. Yeah, so all those in favor of the motion, on the screen? Sure. A recorded vote for Councillor Robinson's motion on the screen. All those in favor? Councillor Cole, Councillor Minna-Wong, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Carroll, Councillor Fillion, and Councillor Robinson is unanimous. And on the item as amendment, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 8. I'm sorry, I flipped over an extra page. Item number 7, request for direction, official plan, 5294, 5304, 5306 Yonge Street. Questions for staff? I don't have, for item 7, I don't have any deputants listed. Is there anyone here who wants to speak on item 7? No? Questions for staff? Speakers? Councillor Fillion would speak, is going to speak.
Yes. I have only had a chance to glance at this report because it only came out this morning, I think. So I think I agree with it, but I haven't had a chance to digest it or go over it with staff. So I would like to move it to council without recommendations so that I can properly
Okay, the local councillor is moving item 7 to council without recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 8, alterations to heritage property. Intention to designate Part 4, Section 29, Ontario Heritage Act, 50 Eglinton Avenue West. Which property is this?
That's the old hydro building at the corner of duplex. We're just adding a few more thousand condos there, so this is a
All right. Okay, the local councillor is moving the recommendations, including 50 Eglinton Avenue West onto the Toronto's Heritage Register. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Why don't we add on extra items now? So we need motions to just add these to the agenda. Additional item 43, report from City Clerk regarding appointment of stakeholder representative to the Larry Gross Fort Still Arena Board, introduced by Councillor Cole. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 44, report from the City Clerk regarding appointment of public members to the North Toronto Memorial Arena Board, introduced by Councillor Cole. All those in favor? Items 45, report from the City Clerk regarding the appointment of public member to Leaside Memorial Community Gardens Arena Board. Councillor Robinson. Okay, item 46, report from the Director of Transportation Services Permits Enforcement regarding encroachment appeal for 2966 Bayview Avenue. Councillor Fillion. 46, but 2966 Bayview? Okay. Okay, all those in favor? Next one's mine, 47, memo submitted regarding 25 Fisherville. Interim request for directions report. All those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Item 48 is removed. We're withdrawing item 48, so it didn't make it on the agenda, so we're not really withdrawing it. We're not.
This is now 48.
Okay, so item 48 is information report from Director of Transportation Planning and Capital Program Transportation Services regarding redesigning bus stop at Wilson Avenue and Brey. And I will move the item for discussion onto the agenda. The only reason that's getting a lot of prominence is it's a TTC route, involves the Catholic School Board, involves transportation, involves public realm. It's a complicated policy piece. I believe we are at item 27. 167 Armour Boulevard. I would move recommendation number 3, approve. It's a demolition. Item number, I'll move recommendation number 3, to demolish and clear the site with appropriate removal of debris and rubble, sod to be laid on the site, and of course, fencing, and so forth. Any questions for staff? No? Speakers? No? All those in favor? Item 28, request to demolish residential building at 21 Southdale. This is in Councillor Robinson's ward. Any questions for staff? Councillor Cole, questions for staff?
Yeah, and I know that these are all residential demolitions. The question I have for staff is there a way we can formally at least advise councillors if there is a demolition of a commercial property in their ward? I'm not saying that we have any jurisdiction, it seems, over that, which is weird, but it's the way I guess provincial law is right now. But can we get a formal listing of demolition, either applications or approvals that are given in our specific wards? And if we could have a list of those perhaps on the agenda just for our information in council agendas, so we know what's being demolished, because, you know, we have all kinds of Saturday morning demolitions taking place, and but at least can we have a listing of the demolitions for commercial properties on our major arterials, for instance?
Through the chair to Councillor, any major demolitions in regards to industrial or commercial properties, there is a notification that is sent prior to the demolition permit, or notifying that a demolition permit has been issued for that particular property. It's not part of an official or a report to council, but it is just a notification.
Could we not get that to the community council for our information, that listing? Because I know I got a demolition notice and it was sent to the former councillor's email, and the only reason I found out about it, I saw the demolition taking place.
So through chair to council, if there was a mistake made in regards to the notifications, we would be willing to correct that. If council so wishes, we would entertain, or we could look at notifying all community council of any activities taking place in the North York.
Yeah, can I speak to that then?
Sure. Any other questions for staff? No? Okay, speakers, Councillor Cole and then Councillor Robinson.
Yes, I just wonder if I could maybe put together a motion that basically says that any demolition of commercial industrial property be listed for North York or Community Council's agenda for information purposes, so that the councillors are aware of the demolition applications or permits that have been granted. I just wonder if you could do that.
Councillor Cole, I'm advised by the clerk that a motion like that, I think it's a good idea, but it's not in order here.
Pardon me?
It's not in order here. So maybe you want to bring it as a member's motion to council, to have staff report back on how that can be done.
Yeah,
The
no,
legal
okay.
framework for having it done.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that
Oh,
either
that's the
at,
fun committee. Oh, yes, no, you might want to bring it to
I'll do it at council.
one of our standing committees.
I'll do it at council to go to Planning and Housing Committee, yes. Okay, that's fine. So I don't have a motion then.
Councillor Robinson, you were going to speak?
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. This is actually a leftover from last term. It's a new part of my ward that I didn't represent at the time. The decision was for the, you know that application at Bayview and Eglinton on the northeast corner, I think very famous hardware store there for many years. When that development was approved, the Section 37, it was determined that a park would be built, or it's really a mouth to the park that's already there, and there was a lack of access. So the resident who lives beside this was here last month and did a deputation and was very upset about all that. So we gave them an additional month to talk to the developer and to park staff. And he would like us to defer this again, but I feel like we have to move on. The parties all agreed to this this commitment to Leaside to open up this park and create more accessibility. Having said that, I do respect the residents' concerns and will commit to working with them as this park unfolds over the years. I think it's going to take a few years, and work to make sure that his property is acknowledged and dealt with throughout the process, and you know, there's some type of buffer. So I really want to be, I'm empathetic to that resident, but at the same time, all parties agreed to this. It's not, council approved it. This was last term. You can't really undo this. So we have to move ahead, but we will keep his property and him in mind as we, this process unfolds. So I'm moving staff recommendations.
1, 2, or 3?
I guess it would be the third.
Third one?
Mr. Chair, yes. Approve
Oh.
with, I would like to, I think the third recommendations with, approve with conditions.
Okay, so on item 28, recommendation number 3 is approval of demolition with conditions. All those in favor? Opposed? She's moving number 3. That is carried.
Thank you.
29, residential demolition 492, 498 Eglinton Avenue East, and 37 Cardiff Road. Councillor Robinson, questions for staff? Speakers? Councillor Robinson, did you want to move the recommendations or select a recommendation and move it?
I guess I'll move staff's second recommendation.
So approval of the demolition?
Yes.
Okay. Approval of demolition is before us. All those in favor?
With conditions. Approve with conditions?
I don't even see a third option here.
There's none on the second, so go with the third?
I only,
Better. Okay. Okay, let's go with
no
that then,
third.
thank you.
There's no third on the,
Yes.
yeah, so she can move it, although it doesn't appear on the agenda summary.
Okay.
Third option doesn't appear under recommendations, but she's welcome to move it.
No, we're on 29, which is Eglinton Avenue East and Cardiff Road.
Is it on the staff report? Okay, although an option 3 with conditions does not appear before you, the clerk will do up a motion afterwards, but you're asking for the The standard conditions,
would prefer-
fencing of the site, clearing of the site, sodding.
Yeah, what we did on the
Right.
South Vale.
I think it's reasonable.
But you're right, it doesn't appear, so
It's
I
not
would prefer
before
that.
us, for some reason, I don't know. Oh, does staff want to make a comment on that?
If I could, through the chair, provide some clarity, this report was prepared by the downtown office because this is an overlap area of the new boundary lines. So I do apologize that third option may have been left out by, it's normally installed by North York staff, but may have been overseen by the downtown.
Let's blame downtown.
Okay.
So that would be preferable. That's why I actually said option 2, because it didn't appear, but option 3 is much more preferable, if that's possible.
All right, so
With
option
conditions.
3.
With conditions.
It's approval with conditions before us. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 30, residential demolition on Cummer Avenue. Questions for staff?
It's okay. Don't worry about it.
It's Councillor Fillion's item. Staff recommendations moved. Did you want 1, 2, or 3?
Oh, sorry. Hold it down for a sec.
Item held down. Permanent public highway closures for Lawrence Heights Revitalization Project. That is Councillor Cole. I've never seen a councillor refuse permanent public highway closures. Yeah, move, staff recommendations moved by the local councillor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And just so my paperwork is correct, Councillor Fillion, you held down Cummer Avenue?
Yes, so
Okay.
I can move.
You ready to go now, or?
Yeah. I think item number, I'll move it with condition number 2.
Okay, there's no conditions.
Sorry, I move it with 3A, B, and A and, because I think it's about to be demolished, so I don't, I think there's construction about to happen there, so, just condition A and B. 3A
Okay,
and B.
so we've amended option 3 slightly. We're only approving conditions A and B. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So I think we jump over to item 32. Encroachment. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm 4 minutes ahead. We actually have to wait a couple of minutes.
Could I move?
Why don't we, are these, have these been distributed?
Could
The
I-
walk-on motions?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mr.
has
Chair.
everyone seen the walk-on motions? Item 43?
Yes.
Appointment of stakeholder representative to Larry Grossman, Fort Sill Arena Board. Councillor Cole? Yes, Gary Silovitz is being moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 44 is appointing Gordon Ashworth and Karen Stintz, both we know, to the North Toronto Memorial Arena Board.
I would move that.
Moved by Councillor Robinson.
She did, yeah. I would move
There's
that.
other appointments here too, if you want to read through them. Councillor, item 2, Jillian Gazase and Janice Mitchell. those in favor of these appointments? Opposed? That is carried. Item 45, appointment of public member to the Leaside Memorial Community Gardens Arena Board. Jennifer Smith. To the Leaside Memorial Community Gardens. Moved by Councillor Robinson. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Additional item 46. Encroachment appeal 2966 Bayview Avenue. This is Councillor Fillion. Okay. Encroachment appeal 2966 Bayview Avenue. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. This is line 47, 25 Fisherville Road. A request for an interim request for directions report. This is something that council has to decide on. Wasn't ready for community council, so we've got to send this to full city council the middle of July. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And this is an item for information, only 48, and it's regarding a bus stop on Wilson Avenue. I think so. We move receipt. Yeah, it's just an update on. Okay. Okay, we can go to item 32, encroachment appeal 33 Lytton. Questions for staff? Let's see if there are any questions for staff. No? Any speakers? No? Councillor Cole is moving the recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 33, encroachment appeal 33 Laird. Questions for staff? It's Councillor Robinson's. Oh, sorry. We do have a deputant here. Oh, is Oz Kamal here? Great, thank you very much. This is item 33, encroachment appeal, 33 Laird Drive. Good morning.
Council. I'm just here just to provide any clarifications on any questions that may arise, given that this was a deferred item from last month. I understood at that time there were questions that we could have potentially assisted on, but we weren't listed as a deputation at the time. So I'm only here to just help clarify if there are any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant?
No,
I
I
think
don't either.
Councillor
I don't think
Robinson's
it was.
ward.
I'd like,
No, you're good?
yeah, I'd like just to move staff recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much for your deputation. Any questions for staff? Speakers? The recommendations have been moved by the local councillor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Encroachment appeal 88 Forest Heights Boulevard.
I just move staff recommendations on that, unless
Yeah.
anybody has any questions.
From staff, any speakers? No? Okay. The recommendations moved by the local councillor, Councillor Robinson. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item, oh my gosh, yeah, so let's go back to some of the held items because we cannot start item 35 for about 12 minutes. Councillor Carroll, you held item 19?
Yes, I did.
So can we deal with that now?
Certainly. The motion can be put on the board, I think. This is item 19, speed hump poll results. This was a 50-50 in terms of results, so not enough to proceed. 50% responding and 50% of those saying yes. It does meet all the warrants for speed humps, but it's clear the community's not ready to go there. But we had a follow-up meeting, and what is clear is that what we really need to do is harmonize the speed reduction. It's 40 kilometers for a section of the road in between a side street and a side street. What they would like to do is, where it says in my motion, Cummer Avenue, that the speed limit on Pine Way be harmonized such that the speed limit is 40 kilometers from Cummer to Weatherstone Crescent. What that gives effect to is that the speed limit will be consistent from Cummer Avenue down to the Hydro Belt. Weatherstone is the street just above where the green belt goes through. And I think that's more what the residents are looking for than the extreme of speed humps. But in the meantime, so that they can begin to sort of get a little more creative than speed humps, just so you know, Councillor Bradford is making great hay of doing a pilot with 880 cities on Danforth. To do a pilot on a suburban street, 880 cities is going to come and pilot some alternative to speed hump types of traffic calming with this community so that we'll have a suburban model as well, all funded by a donor who lost a family member in a pedestrian accident. So I'll report back on that after the summer. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, motion's on the screen. I don't know if we can read it, but it's on the screen. Oh, there we go.
Looks good.
All right, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 21 was also held down. It's Councillor Fillion's. He just... Let's see. Let's do 24, Lawrence Park Traffic Management Plan. Councillor Robinson, any questions for staff? Any speakers?
I would like to speak on it. So just so my councillor colleagues understand, you're absolutely right in identifying earlier that we did lower the speed limits at the end of last term in Lawrence Park. Lawrence Park is experiencing a lot of cut-through traffic for a number of reasons, including Metrolinx being built, which is a bit south, so it's a bit of a stretch, but more because of the Waze app seems to be directing people through Lawrence Park, particularly St. Leonard's, because there's stoplights at various points in the system. So we've now finished the very controversial Lawrence Park environmental assessment, where you'll remember, it was in the news a bit because of the number of trees coming down. We were able to reduce the tree impact quite substantially and get that through council. But now we're embarking on this EA. It has been approved by the province, and we are now starting that process. So transportation engineers and staff have been saying for years, once we start that LPEA, the Lawrence Park Environmental Assessment, and do the stormwater work and rebuilding of the roads, we should also marry that with a traffic study. So you'll remember many years ago, he's retired now, Jay, I forget Jay's last name, but he'd always said you have to wait until we get through the LPEA before we do a full comprehensive traffic study. So yes, we have lowered the speed limits to 30 on the local roads in that area, but we would now like to look at other measures and options because of the cut-through traffic that's really affecting the safety of children trying to walk to Toronto French School on Milden Hall, and the huge impact of the Waze app, which, I've reached out to staff many times on this and we haven't got any resolutions. So we just wanted to do it. There's one street looking for speed humps, St. Leonard's, and that was upsetting some of the other streets. It's very similar to what Councillor Carroll was just referring to. And so instead of just slapping speed humps on one road, we want to do it in a comprehensive way big picture and look at, I think Sean often says, traffic's like water, it finds a way to flow. So we want to do it in a comprehensive way and look at it big picture versus just doing treatment to one street and then impacting neighboring streets. So that is the request we're putting forward on behalf of the residents.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. We have to vary the procedures, I think. I think, Councillor Carroll, you had a question for staff or a question for the mover?
Well, I kind of have, it would be kind of unfair not to ask it of the mover first. But then I do want to follow up with staff. As you're moving this is your recommendation, not staff.
That's correct, yes.
I'm wondering if you have had this conversation with the community and you'd be willing to make it clear today if we were to adopt this. I'm considerably north of this, and I'm having to say to my residents on a regular basis, there's no point in doing a giant traffic master plan right now when Eglinton Crosstown is quite clearly impacting us, all the way up to north of the 401. If we adopt this, would the community understand if the real study, the real meat of the study, happens in a year's time when we have the new normal?
Yeah, so I think that's agreeable. I would just say that we are trying to really be efficient and do it alongside the environmental assessment. So these measures won't be put in tomorrow, but just starting to map out a plan, which we've had multiple conversations with our transportation team. So I think you're absolutely right. That is having an impact, and we will definitely weigh in on that. So I think that's agreeable.
Okay, can I ask a question of staff?
Yes, Councillor Carroll, questions to staff?
So if I can ask a question of staff, I ask it because I resemble this remark. I'm cutting through Lawrence Park right now. When I'm not on the Parkway, it's hell to get anywhere. To get from one side of Eglinton to the other, you end up in these types of neighborhoods. I go up Blythewood, and then sometimes that's all bogged down, and I go up Mildenhall and do all sorts of crazy things. So the question is, I get wanting to coordinate, some infrastructure work that's going on here and all the rest, but is it possible to do sort of a mini amelioration of some problem spots, but do a real master plan when we have the new normal, when the roadways surrounding Eglinton Crosstown, that area, are complete? Because we're really only about a year out from that, as I understand it.
Through the chair, yes, it is possible to do this in stages or phases. There's no set format. Staff would work closely with the residents if they want to do small changes at the beginning, and if those address their concerns, that could be the end of it, or they may want to consider additional measures. There is the open for that possibility.
Okay, thanks. I'll speak, Councillor.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
I would just say that, yes, if you don't mind, one question.
Go ahead.
To staff, I know it's a different division that does the construction, but you're well aware of the environmental assessment that's taken place over 8 years, and the roads will be reconstructed and narrowed to accommodate the trees that we are trying to save, but also it's safer when you have narrower roads and pinch points. So does it make sense to look at that big picture as you're doing an environmental assessment? Like, does it make sense to do a parallel exercise as you're doing this redesign work? I know it's not you, but your colleagues.
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. A lot of the things that we would consider out there would work hand in hand with the improvements that are going through as part of the EA. For example, the construction of sidewalks are a prerequisite for traffic calming to be considered. So those two things would work hand in hand. So absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Robinson. So are we ready to, oh, you want to speak? Oh, Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, so just briefly, I ask my questions because I think it's something we all have to be mindful of. We're getting transportation, we're getting complaints, and sometimes residents, they want to be helpful. So generally they phone not with their problems, but with their problem/solution. Therefore, do this and do this right now. We know the solution. And And I'm in the difficult situation, particularly on north-south routes now, of having to say, that's a great idea, but we really can't study and give you a definitive answer because we're not in normal circumstances. We're in hellish circumstances everywhere because of that largest infrastructure project in Canada. And so this is Lawrence Park being you know, south of Lawrence, from Lawrence down to Eglinton, they're right in the infiltration spot. I always think I have a perfect way across Eglinton in that area, and then they changed something about it, and now we got to find a different way. Sometimes Redpath works, then it didn't. Then Mount Pleasant worked, then it didn't, and so on and so forth. And so we really are probably troubling these people greatly. You know, you get on Mount Pleasant and it's a mess, so you start to divert around. So having heard from staff that they can do this in stages, I'm absolutely willing to vote for it. But I also note that Councillor Shiner before me in the new part of my ward, and Councillor Fillion, when I look at the Section 37 lifts, we have been piling up development by development these traffic study amounts, and they're all still sitting there, 10,000 a time, all the things. We do have to start to calendarize that the minute the crosstown is done, we spend those funds on, okay, this is the new normal. Where does traffic flow now? Where is water traveling to now? So I just want to note that while this proceeds in stages, the bulk of it, I think, should be part of that north-south look that we do of the whole Bayview, Leslie, Don Mills piece as soon as the crosstown is done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Robinson, did you want to move the your recommendation?
Yes, thank you. They're good ones.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Right, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Fillion, can we go back to item 21?
Yes.
Okay. So we're all
do I
set here?
do I need to give the explanation again? I probably should. So this is the intersection of two very heavily traveled roads, Church Avenue, which is part of the service road network running from Yonge Street to Doris, and then continues as a collector road past Doris and Willowdale Avenue, which is a minor collector, which is really starting to function as a collector. Sorry, it's a minor arterial starting to function as an arterial. So we are moving one of the old style pedestrian crosswalks from McKee to this corner as part of the reconstruction of Willowdale Avenue. To me, it makes no sense. It's such a busy spot to not put in a proper, button-activated pedestrian signal. There is a school that fronts onto Church Avenue, McKee School, with about 700 kids in it. There's a Mitchellfield Community Center is right next to it. Lansing Cooperative Nursery School is at the corner of Willowdale and Church. So for safety reasons, and I do understand it doesn't meet the warrants, but for safety reasons, we really should be putting in a proper safe crossing at such a busy spot that will continue to get busier.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Fillion. Councillor Minawong to speak? Or question for staff?
Through the chair, the warrants for the installation of traffic control signals as established by the Ontario Traffic Manual, Book 12. The warrants to install traffic signals. So specifically, as outlined in the report, the minimum vehicle volume, the delay to cross traffic, and the collision hazard. So those are met partially. Minimum vehicular volume, so that considers all the traffic using the intersection. The counts are done over an 8-hour period, but these are expressed as percentages, so it might be easier to say it's required to be, two warrants are required to be met 80%. This is met 61%, so it's partially met. But it's, you know,
So it's either met or not met?
yes, yes.
So it's not met. And the second one?
The second warrant is delayed to cross traffic. That considers vehicles and pedestrians on the side street, so that would be crossing or entering Willowdale Avenue.
And how's that do?
It's met to 48%.
And what should be, what should it be?
Two warrants must be met 80%, or one can be met 100%.
And this one's, how far away is this one from meeting the warrants?
It's not, I would say, it's not close to being met.
Not even close to being met. And so the arrangement right now is there's a PXO there, is that right? What's there now?
There is no controls there now. There is a PXO. It is located the next intersection to the south.
And could you move would you recommend that something be put there other than this traffic signal?
Yes, staff's recommendation is to move the existing PXO to this intersection. It is acknowledged that a control is justified there.
Okay, so you would say that it's justified to put in a crosswalk, but not as traffic signal?
Through the chair, correct.
And then, and a traffic signal is, what, north of 200,000?
Typically 180, 200,000.
So it's 200,000, so we'd be spending $200,000 for something that's not, that doesn't meet the warrants?
Correct.
Okay. I'll just speak, I'm supportive of the crosswalk, but I'm not supportive of the signalized intersection. It doesn't meet the warrants.
Any other questions for staff?
So just to be clear, you're recommending what versus the local councillor?
Through the chair, staff are recommending that the existing pedestrian crossover at Willowdale and McKee be relocated to the intersection of Willowdale and Church. It is agreed that the crossing protection in this area would be more appropriate at the latter intersection.
So really just moving from point A to point B where you think it's more, well, it'll have better safety results.
Through the chair, yes.
And that's based on studies, assessments, engineers. How was that fully assessed?
Through the chair, staff evaluated both intersections. They compared them to the warrants for the installation of traffic control signals. They were not met at either intersection. The existing pedestrian crossover was studied and observed. It was deemed to be operating safely. It is acknowledged that Willowdale is a minor arterial, but it was determined that it is an appropriate control on this section of road. However, it was acknowledged that it would be more appropriate at the intersection with Church.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Are there any other questions for staff? We can go to speakers on the item. I think,
Well, yeah, so
Deputy Mayor, you
there's
wanted
a
to?
motion that says put in the PXO.
Yeah, so the item before us is,
I'll move, so if Councillor Fillion's motion fails, his would come first, right? Then I'm happy to move the PXO, the staff recommendation.
right, so the staff recommendations are the removal of the existing crossover and installation of a pedestrian crossover.
Yeah.
All right, so as long as, and staff are not authorizing the installation of traffic
In the
control
alternative,
signals.
If Councillor Fillion wants to move that in the alternative, because he's a local councillor, he can move that.
I thought I moved it earlier.
Yeah, it's before us.
But he moved the,
He moved an alternative.
yeah, but if that fails, do you want to move the other one because you're the local councillor? Okay.
Okay, so, okay. So
I'm just trying to help.
someone will adopt a staff recommendation should Councillor Fillion's motion fail. So I believe we're voting on Councillor Fillion's motion to install traffic control signals. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. So we can go back to the timed items.
Oh, can I do a motion, introduce a motion? The small one.
Yes. Yes, sure.
It's for parking prohibitions.
Yes, it's, we have to reopen the agenda. It's to add one more item for Deputy Mayor Mena Wong, parking prohibitions. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. According to my notes, we're on 34. Sorry. Application to remove a private tree, 45 Addison Crescent. Deputy Mayor Mena Wong is the local councillor.
Oh.
Any questions for staff?
So, just on this, Mr. Chairman, there is a confidential report. And there is a confidential report from city solicitor.
How?
So I don't necessarily, I can ask a whole bunch of questions, but based on the confidential report, or, actually, maybe I will ask some questions.
We could send it to council without recommendation.
No, I want to deal with it now.
Well, council will probably think differently on
Well,
what we decide here. They usually do.
not if they read the confidential report.
Okay, fair enough.
Councilor Carroll, do you want to look at mine? So, there is a report. Is someone here from Public Health? Yes. Great. I have questions. So, I'm going to sit here because the mic, someone took my microphone. I think it's a plot, but. So this is a walnut tree. So my first question is, if someone has an allergy to nuts and they eat a walnut, what happens?
We've taken a look at this specific case. With
No,
regards-
sorry, Mr. Chairman. I didn't ask about the specific case. I'm asking a general question. This fellow's from Public Health. If a child who has a walnut, has an allergy to nuts, eats a walnut, what happens?
Allergic reactions due to the ingestion of walnuts can range from itching and swelling of the mouth to an anaphylactic allergic response, which, if left untreated, can lead to death.
Sorry, am I going to places that I shouldn't go? Because I'm asking about the medical reaction to a child that eats, or an adult who's allergic to nuts, ingests a walnut. And it is related to the report, the public report that's here. I don't think I'm going into the staff, Public Health wrote a report about walnuts. So I'm asking questions about walnuts. Now, if the city solicitor says we can't go there, then I understand that. I didn't think I was breaking any rules.
Well, the problem is you're zeroing in on the content of the confidential attachment.
But I'm asking questions, I'm asking general questions about walnuts.
I think general questions about walnuts are in order. If it focuses on an individual, if it focuses in on an individual at the household and their personal health, I think we have to go in private.
Fair enough. No, I'm
I
gonna,
think
I'm gonna stay general.
Yeah, I would rule.
It's not my intention to,
I would rule that a general discussion about walnuts is.
But is a general discussion about walnuts related to this agenda item any more than a general discussion about?
Well, this is very specific to the
Mr. Chair,
tree.
I would warrant, I would argue that there's, part of this is a public report. I'm asking questions about the public report.
Right, it is.
Why don't we have the in-camera first, and then in-camera we can discuss what will be allowable when we come back out?
No, there are references in the public report to allergic reaction to walnuts. The questions are regarding allergic to reaction to walnuts, which I would deem the questions to be in order, and just don't venture into the confidential attachment.
Okay, so what we heard said, so there's a potential for some person who eats a walnut to have an extreme reaction that could actually end with someone could end up in the hospital easily, and then isn't it also true that the more times you end up the more you have the nuts, each successive reaction can be worse?
I'm unaware of that. I'm not
Oh.
sure, sir.
Sorry, are you
I'm not a medical doctor nor an allergist. I'm an environmental health specialist.
You're which?
An environmental health specialist.
You're an okay. An environmental health specialist
yeah.
is what? What do you do?
We basically look at conducting research, doing policy development, things of that nature.
Okay, so I'll ask some more questions then. So the report that's signed by the medical officer of health doesn't really squarely come down on this what's the difference between a black walnut and a regular walnut?
I'm sorry, I don't have that information.
So this report actually says, very little is known about allergic reactions to black walnuts. So, Mr. Chair, I'd say it's a fair question to ask. If someone's going to have an allergic, what's the difference between a regular walnut and a black walnut? And this gentleman doesn't know.
I would,
Huh?
just looking at the problematic aspects of this case, and we need a staff member here to answer these questions. You might want to just move it up to council without recommendation.
Well, I'd like to move that either we go into camera or we move. We are going to camera?
We are going.
Okay, excellent.
Well,
Yes, I've already indicated that I want to go in camera.
Right.
I have already indicated.
all right. Is it the will of committee to go in camera?
Yes, I believe I am.
I will move,
That is my will.
I'll move that the North York Community Council recess its public session to meet in closed session to consider NY 7.35 titled Application to Remove a Private Tree at 45 Addison Crescent. The reason being that the report from the city solicitor contains advisory communications that are subject to solicitor-client privilege.
I'm wondering if we could do that after, I assume some members of the public.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to, yeah, that's fine.
Do you want to make it the last item of the day?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Just so long as I don't have to read this out again.
No,
I could move
let's,
33.
okay, let's hold this item down,
Sure.
and let's,
Oh, I meant 41, thank you, yeah.
This is remarkable, if you read this report. The Board of the Public Health Officers are in the lead. Because
I'm not sure.
item 36,
they're saying, we don't.
application to remove a city-owned tree and a private tree, 77 Citation Drive.
They don't want to say that.
I don't believe anyone has come to speak on this. It's in my ward, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Seeing no deputants and having had zero contact with the resident, I'll move the staff recommendation.
Okay, staff recommendation for denial is before us. All those in favor? This is item 35, 77 Citation Drive, local council.
Item 36.
Sorry, item 36, 77 Citation Drive, local council has moved the staff recommendation of denial of removal. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 37, 11:45 a.m. timed item. Actually, it's mine. French exemption for 28 Bowering Walk. Any deputations on this item? Great. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. Good morning, Council. Thank you very much for coming out a couple of weeks ago, Councillor Pasternak, as well as Inspector Mado. We'd been trying to solve this problem for almost 2 years now at 28 Bowring Walk with the neighbor to the south, and it's been very difficult coming up with something that the neighbor to the south would agree with, as he had installed decorative lattice on his side of the fence. We tried to come up with a few proposals, and the one that he has finally agreed to very late last week was covering the entire side of the fence with transparent plexiglass, therefore making the lattice non-climbable. And I spoke to Inspector Mado about this, and he had said it's not strictly according to bylaw as per construction, but if council voted to pass it, that he may recommend that as well. That's really all I have, other than if this is denied, then the neighbor is prepared to go to court to fight for his rights to retain his decorative lattice untouched.
All right. I have a question for the deputant. Any other questions? Yeah, so just very quickly, I came out of that meeting when I visited the site that we would ask the homeowner to build their fence 1.2 meters higher, if my memory is correct. Is that arrangement no longer on the table?
That was, in his eyes, bad taste to have an extra 1.2 meters of fence put on top of the existing fence, and then that would necessitate the probable removal of the maple trees adjacent to the fence. Otherwise, the maple trees would count as climbable.
So the neighbor has agreed that he'd be willing to accept a plexiglass installment against his lattice?
Yes, that's correct. Down the entire distance, which is quite a bit more costly.
All right, I'm done. I do have questions for staff. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Well, thank you very much for coming out, and thank you for your time on this matter.
Thank you kindly. Appreciate it.
Questions for staff?
I asked it offline. I'm good.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, the motion, we were going to approve with conditions, the fence exemption with a 1.2 meter build up of the fence. This deputant has come with a solution that a plexiglass barrier on the lattice on the adjoining property would make it safe. Is that your assumption as well?
Good morning, Council. The suggestions that the homeowners have sent us, it would eliminate the climbability features. The issue is that the plexiglass and the construction of the plexiglass onto the existing fence is not within the requirements of the pool enclosure part of the fence bylaw. So in this particular case, what they would be asking for an exemption at this point would be the type of materials used in the construction of a pool enclosure.
So, I mean, of all the properties I've visited for this kind of situation, the problem is on the applicant's side and not on a neighbor's side. In this case, the lattice is not the pool owner's lattice. It is the neighbor's lattice that abuts the property and creates a, I don't know, a climbing allurement or whatever you want to call it. has the neighbor accepted this solution? They will agree to the plexiglass installation on their side.
To my understanding, Council, yes, I think they're in agreement of that type of material being used, and the fact that that type of material would remain in place in a safe and constructed manner, and maintained throughout the life of the pool.
All right, so if I move a motion to grant the exemption on that condition, would it be safe?
It would eliminate the climbability functions.
Okay, fair enough. Any other questions for staff? So, yeah, so councilors, my problem is I had a motion, I visited the site, I guess we're on speakers now. I visited the site and it seemed like a 1.2 meter build out would have it as a safe fence. Obviously, there's been discussions since I visited the site that a plexiglass barrier built on the adjoining property would make the site safe. So we need a new motion that I would move to grant the exemption on that condition. So, should we hold the item down, or do you need a few minutes? Okay, so we're going to hold the item down, and I'll have my motion in a few minutes. That's item 37. Item 38, fence exemption, 531 Cranbrook Avenue. Questions for staff? This is Councillor Coles.
Staff's comments on this. After further conversation with staff, it is unsafe. Spoke to John Paul. I wonder if staff could comment on the recommendation to refuse to grant the application for an exemption.
I don't have a speaker.
I know, but we have one here.
Just to intervene for a second, I'm trying to do several things here at once. There was a walk-on speaker for this item. Is Seton Tanzanzap here? Okay. This is item 38, 531 Cranbrook Avenue. You're here to speak on that item? Yep. Okay. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Last summer, we built our backyard pool. We chose our gates because we had seen them being installed in other pools. They were also being built last summer. The gates for our pool are very safe. They are over 5 feet tall, where the city's own requirement is only 4 feet. They're non-climbable. The differential between the horizontal bars on our gates is 4 feet. When I came in front of the committee last month, we established with the help of city staff that the gates chosen by us were indeed allowed halfway through the summer last year. Had our inspection taken place a couple of months earlier, our gates would have been deemed perfectly acceptable. The change in policy was not communicated to pool builders. My pool builder, who had been building pools in Toronto for 25 years, told me these gates were great and that he had built plenty of pools with these gates. He was shocked when he learned the city changed policy mid-season without notice. Unfortunately, upon the first inspection, our gates and pool were already built. We didn't try to circumvent any laws. The city's own pool inspector told me that our gates are solid, safe, and secure, but he cannot formally approve our pool without the committee allowing it. I hope you guys can help.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant?
Yeah, and I guess the, we deferred this last time, and I know my staff attended.
Yeah, thank you for sending her out.
Yeah, and she, it's not something she looked at very thoroughly. Just in terms of, you were sort of caught in between the change, right?
That's right.
And And I guess also your pool builder, did he check on what the rules were, or what was his role in all this?
He told me, I mean, I think he built pools, or other people built pools that year, that summer, with this exact gate. And I don't think anybody even thought that halfway through the season, I think this change was made in June or something, that they just said, okay, this is no longer allowed. But that's where we were caught.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the deputant? No? Questions for staff? Councillor Carroll?
Yes, so questions of staff. So first of all, refresh my memory. When did we make it sharply defined that you can't just put a gate in front of an openable door?
I'm sorry, Councillor, can you repeat the question? I apologize.
When did we make it clearly defined in the bylaw that you can't just put a gate in front of an openable door and call the pool enclosed?
The original Chapter 447, as it was amended a number of years ago, never included the allowance of a gate in front of a door. The municipal licensing and standards was attempting to modernize our bylaw outside of actually rewriting the bylaw in order to help out community members and pool owners in order to change with the times. That was done in August of 2017 with strict requirements which allowed gates to be put in front of doors.
With strict requirements?
Yes.
But does the door not also have to be, the door has to be fixed closed, doesn't it? What are the strict requirements?
The strict requirements at the time were to have at least a 1.2 meter fence that was self-closing, self-latching, that was affixed to the actual dwelling itself, in lieu of a fourth fence that would have been at least 1.2 meters away from the water's edge. At which point in time the design was incorporated, as you see with this particular property, where a similar fence that met the requirements under normal circumstances under the pool enclosure bylaw, but the only difference is instead of being a minimum of 1.2 meters away from a structure, it was actually affixed to the structure. But at which point in time it was then rescinded, after which our legal department interpreted it and deemed it that it would not be considered safe. So
has this, as what is now allowable, been made really clear to the sector, the pool
Yes.
infrastructure sector?
When property owners apply for a pool permit, they're provided Chapter 447 for them to read and familiarize themselves in detail. If they have any questions, they can seek a Q&A with anyone of the Toronto buildings officials and or our department, more specifically because we deal with the pool enclosure itself.
Right.
At which point in time the ownership is with the owners to understand it and approach us if they have any questions.
Right, and so if you hire a contractor who says, I'll take care of the permits for you, he gets that. That's placed in his hands.
I can't speak for this particular property, but in normal circumstances, the contractor will do everything for them in order to help them out from a customer service point of view and do everything for the property owner. The problem with that, the ownership of any violations still exists with the property owner. So the contractor is long gone, and now the property owner now has to deal with the issues at hand. In this particular set of circumstances, the contractor may very well have worked to benefit with the homeowner. The problem is that at the time of the application, it was outside of what was normally permitted based on that memo that the contractor may have been basing their builds on for a period of time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's the problem that we encountered at this point.
Okay. Is there a way to make this compliant with a minimum amount of adjustment?
The issue at hand is that the original blueprints and drawings that were submitted to the City of Toronto through the Toronto Buildings Department, which was then supplied to us for review, was permitted. The problem is that the property owner and/or the contractor deviated from the original agreement of the site plan. So what had happened was that when they applied for their permit, they were told, go ahead, what we see is good to go, install what we see. When we arrived on site in order to do our pool enclosure inspection, the officer then indicated that it wasn't in compliance based on the time of the inspection, because at that point in time, the memo that allowed what they had there was not permitted. So therefore, they were in violation, which brings us up to today. If the property owner had built what they originally agreed to do, then we wouldn't be here today.
Right. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
All right, thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for staff regarding 531 Cranbrook Avenue, fence exemption?
I have a question.
Councillor Cole?
So what about the safety benchmark here? The way it stands right now, what are the safety perils here with the way it is built today?
I did the inspection on the property myself, and the gates that are affixed to the dwelling do meet the requirements of the fence enclosure part of the bylaw. They are self-closing, they are self-latching, they are not themselves climbable. The problem is that the issue remains that climbability features are available within 1.2 meters of these gates, which in lies the issue where, if you see in one of the photos, the homeowner's kitchen table is within that 1.2 meters. The way that they're built is structurally sound. The way that they function is within the requirements that I expect and my standards. The only issue is the climbability feature of the materials on the inside. The other issue that we didn't mention, because it wasn't an issue as far as I was concerned, and I relayed that to the property owner, was the windows that have access to the rear yard were not a safety issue on my end. They were structurally sound, they were well maintained, and there was zero chance of any child getting into the backyard through those windows based upon my inspection at that time. The only issue remained is the fact that it was a climbability hazard.
So could you, again, the kitchen table issue is the climbability, you might say, conflict here, right?
Based on what's in the photos, that is what everyone can relate to. The way that the bylaw is written is that anything that could be made available within 1.2 meters of the pool enclosure has to be removed. So for example, if there was a pool box with toys in it, as an example, that has to be removed from the area in order to prevent any climbability or using it as a climbability. Any type of typical patio furniture, in 99% of the installs are not an issue because most of that furniture is well away from any type of pool.
So what about this kitchen table? Can't he just move the kitchen table?
Yes, he could, Councillor, but the problem is that the table can always be moved back.
It's about 200 pounds.
Not disputing that. And it's just, you have to understand from our point of view is that based on the current build, it doesn't meet the requirements based on Chapter 447. The install was based on a memo, not an actual modification of the City of Toronto bylaw. And it was in all factor, the memo was omitted in May of 2018, and the building permit was received in September of 2018. So in reality, the permit was actually done many months after the memo was already rescinded.
Okay, I just want to get back to the kitchen table.
Yep.
So is there any way the applicant could move the kitchen table and secure it in a spot where it can't be moved and it doesn't become an additional climbability fault?
That would be, at the end of the day, the decision to allow that would be left up to council. From our particular perspective, the issue is that anything can be used, and that particular section of the bylaw is not in the bylaw. They are required to have a fourth fence, and they do not have a fourth fence. So even if the kitchen furniture was moved and affixed into a different section of the house, the reality is those two gates that are affixed to the house don't comply with the City of Toronto bylaw, and they don't have that fourth fence which was originally agreed upon.
So the real issue is not the kitchen table, it's the fence.
Yes. It's the availability of climbing over that fence.
Okay. thank
It's
you.
the unfortunate set of circumstances is Chapter 447 is written pretty much in a black and white scenario, and when we start getting into the what ifs, municipal licensing and standards always takes the position of safety, and it's an unfortunate set of circumstances when property owners want to try to modernize it, and we try our best to work with them. But in this particular case, we have to take the position that based on its current install, it would be an unsafe condition.
Yeah, and that's understandable, but is there anything that can be done?
Councillor Cole, if we could wrap, you're over time, if we could wrap.
Just one last question, thank you, Mr. Chair. It is a complicated issue, you know, and I can imagine what the homeowner's going through.
Like, it's a 6-foot drop from the top of the gate. It's not, that's going to hurt a child. There's no way they're going to, like, climb over it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I thought you were finished.
Okay.
Thank you.
But so if I could just get back, could there any change be done to this fence to comply without rebuilding the whole pool area?
They would have to move both gates to the area that was originally agreed upon based on the site plan.
We're going to really have to
Okay.
to move on.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
fencing around pools is one of the most complicated, difficult decisions we have to make here. And my policy in my office is I go visit the site to actually see what's going on and see if there's any way for a safe solution. What would you like to do? Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, we're on speakers. Councillor Carroll, Councillor Cole.
You want me to go first? Okay. Well, I'll simply put the staff recommendations, sorry. I'll move the staff recommendation, the initial one to refuse, that as is my want, in all things related to pool fences, I go with the staff recommendations. We just dealt with one previously, that while it had an outside fence issue with the lattice, they worked to find a solution. What went unnoticed there, because it wasn't an infraction, is similar to this house in that it's a beautiful renovation with not a huge backyard, but they wanted to have a pool. And what's around that pool is that very popular these days, glass fencing with a solid base. That glass fence ain't going nowhere. And I am a big fan of that because it architecturally does match some of the renovations we're seeing in this neighborhood. If you do a Google search of this neighborhood and really zoom in and do a little 3D switch ups, you'll find that we have a number of grandfathered pools that aren't fenced in. We have a lot of safety issues, and so where new applications come along, or applications to put in just the pool itself where the house is already done, wherever we can, I think we have to uphold our bylaw as best we can and deal with the anomalies. But to have that fourth wall around the fence, maybe it changes the size of the pool. Maybe it has to be right sized to do with the backyard. But my goal is that not one more child drowns in a pool or in the puddle of water in the pool cover in the winter. And so I move the staff recommendation for refusal where they see it as warranted. Those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Cole.
Yeah, and this is, again, a very challenging situation for, I'm sure for our staff and for the homeowner and the family who I think has tried their best, given the sort of complex situation they find themselves in and the technical variations that occur. Reluctantly, I'm going to have to support the staff recommendation on the side of safety. I would come very close to giving support to the applicant. I can see his real dilemma here. I really feel for him and his family. But and the aspect of the safety and the long run, I'm going to have to support the staff recommendation.
The refusal report. Okay. Any other speakers? Okay. The staff recommendation to refuse item number 1 on item 38, 531 Cranbrook is before us. All those in favor of the refusal report? Opposed? That is carried. I have two very quick, I guess there's one reopening. Item 21, Councillor Fillion is asked to reopen and amend, I think, an earlier motion that we passed?
Yes, thank you. Staff advised me that I neglected to authorize the removal of the existing pedestrian crossover, so it's...
Okay, just let me make it official. All those in favor of reopening? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, move your amended motion.
So the motion is to authorize the removal of the existing pedestrian crossover from Willowdale Avenue, immediately north of McKee Avenue, and then authorize the installation of the traffic control signals at Willowdale and Church.
Okay, great. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. An item held down, it was item 37, fence exemption at Bowering Walk. We have changed the motion to require, we're granting the fence exemption with the condition that they erect a plexiglass barrier covering the lattice on the adjoining property. And apparently the two homeowners have agreed to this solution. Staff have said that that makes it safe. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Now move to item 39. And I believe we have a deputant for item 39. 153 Strathallan, Michael Bylaw. Michael Bylaw, Mr. Bylaw?
No, that's Mr. Beeler. I'm Mr. Fleischman next door.
Oh, you're Mr. Bylaw?
Let him go.
Your...
My name is Philip Fleischman. I'm the co-owner of 151 Strathallan, directly next door. And this is our objection to the existing fence. Just to let you know what it looks like.
All right. You've registered with the clerk?
I phoned in.
Did you register with the clerk to speak?
No, but I phoned in before I came.
Oh, just register now. Okay. Give us a minute, and let's hear from Mr. Bylaw.
Okay.
Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you for hearing me. My name is Mike Beeler, and I'm the owner of 153 Strathallan. Just to make it clear, this is not a fence exemption for a pool enclosure. I have a pool, and all of that has been taken care of, and I do have an existing fence around the perimeter of my property. Along the east side, adjacent to 151 Strathallan, I have about 80-odd feet running from the back of my property up to the front corner of my house, which has a fence, in most cases, below the 6'6" requirement. I have an issue in my backyard with the neighbor's tree. It's a large evergreen that had about half of its branches over onto my side of the property. In order to facilitate cutting it back, it left I mean, it's an ugly tree that's just leaking sap all over. So I had cut back the branches that were on my property, and to cover up the look of that tree, I put up a 16-foot fence, 1 foot in on my property as a screen. I also did a pool equipment enclosure on the back corner of my property that's 4 inches above the required height. The 16-foot panel is really just to cover that tree and keep the growth back from my property. At the top of it, it has started to come over again, so I'll have to do some pruning back there. And I do intend to raise the perimeter fence to the required 6'6" height to try to mitigate the weeds coming over from the neighbor's property.
Questions for the deputant? Oh, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Please come to the mic. You have 5 minutes. If you could sign in with the clerk after you speak, that'd be appreciated.
I certainly will. First of all, the fence that separates our property, the original fence, was built by myself and the other neighbors and is to the maximum height of the allowable bylaw height. This is what the fences look like on the other side of the property. And so they're all built to maximum height. Now,
It's not my side of the property.
All right.
yeah, but now
It's not a debating society. You've had your chance. Thank you.
now on Mr. Beeler's side of the property, we have the same fence, same height, and the part that you're seeing above it that Mr. Beeler built, you can see is significantly higher than is permitted by bylaw. And when the bylaw inspector came out, he said, yes, it is a fence. It does exceed the existing bylaw. And for us, on a personal level, it does shadow our property. It affects our view of that direction of the property. It's frankly an eyesore. That's just one portion of the fence. The other portion that he built as well, which he referred to as a pool enclosure, not an enclosure, but a pool structure, to keep things in for the pool. That's what that looks like from our side of the fence as well. And that was also cited as being above the bylaw required height. Now, in terms of trees, Mr. Beeler, I haven't taken pictures of these, but Mr. Beeler planted trees that are in excess of, maybe 20 feet in height, which goes from this structure that he built, directly towards the other fence. And what he's really doing is creating a barrier between the two properties. And it's notable that that curtain and the balcony, as far as I understand from the building office, was not an approved structure and part of the original plans for his house, and has also been cited. So, bottom line is that this fence that's been built so much above our property is affecting us sitting in the backyard. We're now in shadow in the afternoons, and they knew when they built this that it was not in keeping with bylaw, because I went and I spoke to the builder who was building the fence, and I said, you realize that this is in excess of the bylaw height? And he said, yes, I know. So this wasn't done by mistake. This was done with complete knowledge that it was not in keeping.
All right. Any questions for the deputant? No, I'm sorry. No, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but it's only councilors can. Sorry? No, it's, no, I mean, the deputy mayor has mentioned the courts. Certainly, if you're not happy with our decisions, there is, you can go to the courts. Okay, questions for staff? Councillor Carroll.
I know it's not the reason that it's before us. We're here because of height restrictions. I'm just wondering if you can set my mind at ease. I can't see how the pool is secured. The side of the house runs along here, and I see glass there. Is the pool enclosed on all four sides, in your view?
Yes, good afternoon, Council. I have to add that I didn't personally inspect this pool enclosure and the matter that's before us, but there's no mention in the report of any issue with the security of that pool enclosure at all. So I'm assuming that everything else is within the bylaw in respect to that pool enclosure permit. And
I'll have to do the same in future if we could do that, where we see a wall but not a fence. It would be great if it was mentioned that has been signed off on. That would make me feel better. But it isn't mentioned in the report, so I'm with you. We have to assume.
No, I have no doubt that if a supervisor had been out there, if there were an issue, that issue would have been addressed. So I'm confident that there is no other issue with it.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you.
Those are my questions, Mr. Chair. Did you want me to take the chair? I'm going to assume that I'm taking the chair for a second. Are there any other questions of staff? I believe 4 is quorum. Yes. If you take your seat, we have quorum.
Yeah, my apologies. Councillor Cole, questions for staff?
Yeah, just in terms of the fence, does it cause shadowing on the next door neighbors there? I guess it's the next door neighbor at 151. Is it significant shadowing?
Yeah. Okay.
Through the chair, it's that fence line is on the east property line, so sun rising in the east, I can only assume that there would be a shadow cast from it. As I say before, I haven't been on site, but I imagine that a good 10 feet fence is going to cast somewhat of a shadow there, but only into the applicant's property, I would have thought, for the majority of the time, until the late evening when the sun turns around into the west.
Okay, and what about the height? How much higher is it than the allowed limit?
So the maximum height allowable under the fence bylaw, chapter 447, would be 2 meters, and if we want to call it a privacy screen, it is in fact a fence, but the screen portion of it is actually measured at 3 meters, which is close on 10 feet. The pool equipment storage unit, which is the other part of the exemption request, is 2.4 meters. So it's between 0.4 and 1 meter higher than that permitted.
Okay, and that's the fence plus the pool storage area?
Yeah, so the fence would be 1 meter higher than that permitted, and the pool storage area is 0.4 meters higher than that permitted.
And were there complaints about this fence? How far back do the complaints go?
I don't have that information, I'm afraid. This is the information that I have is to do with the exemption here. This would have come about as a result of a complaint, though, but I don't know about any previous ones to that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Speakers? Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, it is a difficult neighbor confrontation over fences, as we see here quite regularly. I just think overall, since it is higher than permitted, and it is quite a sizable fence that does create shadowing on the next door neighbor, I'm going to basically support refusing this application. As difficult as it is for the neighbor who's trying to also protect his property, but it is above the required bylaw heights, and so I'm going to support refusing the application for an exemption.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm moving refusal.
Okay. Okay, the local councilors moved refusal of the exemption. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 40, request for fence exemption, rear yard 344 Lawrence Avenue West. Jack Perez? Oh, yes, I need a motion to extend, to complete. Councillor Menawang?
All those in favor?
Mr. Chair, as I explained, I have a 12:30 meeting with constituents, so I'll slip out and come back as quickly as I can. But I would like to move 41, which is my fence exemption, if that's possible.
Well, yes, we can alter the agenda. The problem is, Councillor Robbins, if you leave, we lose quorum.
Yeah. No, Councillor
Where-
Carroll's just.
Oh, there she is. Okay,
Here.
good. Okay, I thought
Yeah.
she left. Okay. So we're going to go back to 41? Oh, no, go ahead to 41.
I just wanted to move that, the second recommendation.
On 41?
Yeah. There's no speakers on it.
No questions for staff, no speakers?
No speakers.
It's a fence exemption, rear yard, 36 Old Colony.
Easy peasy. Yeah, it's an easy one. 41, staff recommendation, second recommendation.
Okay, so the local councilors
approve.
moved recommendation 2, granting the application with conditions.
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. That was item 41. And we can go back to item 40. Request for fence exemption, rear yard 344 Lawrence Avenue West. I believe I had called for Jack Porras. Oh, there we are. Great, thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Council. Greatly appreciate it. I reside at 342 Lawrence Avenue West, next door to the applicant. Just to go over some of the items for the facts for this, which I've shared with Council already. This is the view from Gray Road, showing what the material is made out of and so forth. That's been shared, including a child's beach ball, protruding metal, and so forth. It's still up to this day blocking sunlight to my lawn, which is currently dying. Next, what I do have, just to show over as well, is currently if the application is approved even to the new level or stays as is, you can currently see that there is only one area for light to come into my property to my lawn. So the exemption would be cutting off and building basically a citadel around my property without my express intent or ask.
We'll be done by then.
Related to that as well is, you know, if this is a concern about privacy, just to show from my own window, just taking a quick picture, this is not from any security cameras or any such. Just everyone in our neighborhood can see each other's neighbors' yards from their second-story window. Everyone. It's not a question, how high do I have to build a fence to get privacy? You're not going to get it. You know, we live in a city. This is how it works. Related to that, this is more surprising. I think it goes into being a good faith actor. This is the side of the property. You will notice originally in the photo from city staff in 2018, there's a mirror for backing up along the driveway. Since this application has been put forward by the applicant, they've extended, after being notified of what's suitable and unsuitable materials, a mirror higher than what's allowed under the bylaw, knowing it's in the same area under their application. So it's made out of unsuitable material, and if you're going to assume that they were a good faith actor, they've already been explained what material is unsuitable and suitable. And related to that as well is if this is an issue of privacy from it, they've set up their chair to watch into my back windows. So they can sit on their patio and go in there. I can look back. I don't know what the intent of this is, but it's coming after it. It's a little unusual, So my preference is just not to grant the exemption, just on the basis of not being a good faith actor. But also, I'd like to enjoy my property and have a green lawn instead of having some dirt. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Any questions for the deputants? I'm looking for Patricia Lampropoulos. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Hi. First, I'd like to say that some of the statements you've just heard are false and misleading, and now you're going to hear the facts.
Okay, let's avoid the attacks and stick to the facts.
Esteemed Chair and members of North York Community Council, my name is Patricia. I'm daughter of Gus and Helen Lampropoulos, owners of 344 Lawrence Avenue West, who have lived there for over 55 years. My parents, who are in their 80s and 90s, regret that they could not be here today. They are requesting a fence exemption in order to keep in place a privacy screen they erected 2 years ago on their property, made with materials available to them at the time, which is located at the rear yard of their own property. This screen exists solely to protect their privacy on their own private property from one specific surveillance camera in particular, situated closest to their home, which belongs to the next door owners of 342 Lawrence Avenue West, Ms. Cindy Cipher and Mr. Jack Pures, who just spoke. The specific camera in question is one of several of their backyard cameras which capture images of our property from varying distances. There is also a camera on their front porch angled toward our home. My parents were always willing, from the very beginning, to voluntarily remove the privacy screen altogether and withdraw the request for the fence exemption, provided Mr. Pures and Ms. Cipher would first just move eastward at least 4 feet, just this one camera, and make sure it's not angled toward our property, which they have so far refused to do. It is not normal to be filmed by others without permission on your own property 24/7. The privacy screen is structurally sound and safe and has not changed in any way since its erection. There are no beach balls and there has not been any new construction. It does not block any sunlight or daylight from entering their home, as it's not located directly in front of any of their windows. Any suggestion that we can see into bedrooms is false. Their bedrooms are on the second floor. The house is identical to ours. Even before the privacy screen, we had no desire or ability to look up into their bedrooms, and that's still the case. We're not the ones with cameras. No one has complained about it until now. We are happy to enjoy great relationships with all of our other neighbors. If a fence exemption is approved by council, my parents would be pleased to reconstruct it in compliance with city standards. And now I'd like to show you, draw your attention to some photographs which support my statements. Where you see the post-it note, that's the camera here that has necessitated the erection of the privacy screen. Down here is the top of at the bottom is the fence, the top of the fence that divides our backyards down here. The second photograph will demonstrate all their other cameras. Camera 1 is over here to the right, the very right. This is our rooftop where the pointer is. This is camera 2 in their backyard, camera 3. And also, here's the one at the front. Right here. And if there's any concern about the appearance or unattractiveness of the privacy screen, I draw your attention to the condition of their front yard, which has been since 2017 left completely unrepaired after the porch and front stairs were removed. Here's another image.
We're getting a
Sorry,
little
it's not
off
clear.
topic.
Well, here's the last point. There's some concern about how the impact on their yard.
Okay.
This is the yard. This is a box mattress that has chronically been there. It's a debris field, the backyard.
Those are
So
property
that's
standards.
all I have to say. I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? Councillor
Yeah.
Cole?
Now, you're saying that you're agreeable to removing that fence that screen you've got up there right now?
On condition it be reconstructed according to city standards, made of wood, yeah,
And when would you do that?
right away, if it's approved,
Okay, thank you.
and to the height that we're requesting. And the only purpose of that is just to obstruct the view of the camera. It's not that everybody can look into everybody's driveway, just, I mean, my parents are elderly, they can't really mount the patio properly, so they sit in the driveway proper. There's a direct view from that one camera.
Okay.
We're not asking it be removed, we're asking that it be just moved over by 4 feet where it's not an issue and it's not angled toward us, that's all. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for the deputants? No? Okay, questions for staff? I am curious about one thing, and I'm not sure I can get the answer. Can neighbors, do they have the right to block the view of what they consider intruding cameras from a neighbor? I'm asking staff whether.
Yeah, good afternoon, staff. There's no bylaw that regulates that at all. We would revert to the fence bylaw in this instance and consider it a fence. The intention of the applicant is to install that to shield it from view, but there's no provision in the bylaw that provides us anything to deal with that.
So the fact that there might be a CIA safe house next door or what have you, it has nothing to do with this issue?
No, that's correct, it doesn't.
Okay, fair enough. I'm done. Any other questions for staff? Any speakers? What would the local councillor like to do?
Another difficult neighbor-to-neighbor situation. Given the applicant is agreed to replace that temporary screen that's up there with something that complies with proper material, etc., and given their concern about something they can't do anything about, the cameras make them very uneasy, and I think hinders their enjoyment of their property. And so I'm going to support granting the application for the fence to remain, and that's the decision that I hope council would support.
All right, the local councillor has moved option 2, granting the application for the rear fence height without conditions. Okay, Councillor Carroll, to speak.
Sorry, I was trying to go quick, but I'm going to have to speak then. I'm sorry, but I really can't vote in favor of a fence of that height. This is, it's not really clear to me in the alternate recommendations. It says require the installation be maintained in good repair, not be changed to appropriate materials. I really can't vote for this without knowing for sure that they're going to tear it down and put up one that's proper. But even then, I would have trouble adopting that height because you will find it happening in dots throughout the neighborhood in no time at all. And I don't think we want that. And so just because I want them on the table for myself to be able to vote on, I will place recommendation number 1 as well to be voted on.
Any other speakers? Okay, I guess we're going to go with Councillor Cole's motion first. He is moving the granting the application, and all those in favor?
There you go. You got it.
Opposed? That is carried, making Councillor Carroll's motion redundant.
Okay.
believe we're on item 42, and then we'll go into private. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. There is an additional item, sorry, 49, which we'll get to in a minute. So 42 is fence exemption to Bond Avenue. Deputy Mayor Minna-Wong's ward. Questions for staff? Is there anyone here to depute on 2 Bond Avenue? No? Questions for staff?
Yes, that's correct. I know it looks like it's the front yard from the pictures. I question myself on that as well. The side yard is the side to the west. Oh, hang on, sorry.
So I'm
Sorry,
go ahead.
the front yard is the location to the west side of the property, so the side yard would be to the south side of the property in this instance.
The side yard, sorry, say that again?
Yeah, the front yard is the where the proposed higher section of the fence would be, which is on the west side of the property.
The front yard is on the west side of the property?
No, the front yard is on the south side of the property.
And that's the one that's...
The proposed fence is to be on the...
Can you show it on the screen?
Certainly.
Because these black and white things are not fantastic. Oh, are you going to put the black and white one? That is actually excellent. Yeah, it's colored. I was thinking you're going to put the black and white one on. It doesn't help me that much.
So the south-facing section here is the front yard, and the proposed...
Are you looking for an exemption for the front, for that piece, the front yard?
No, the
side yard.
The exemption is for the side yard here.
On the Leslie Street side, right?
Correct, on the west side of it, yes.
Yeah, and that's one. So the bylaw says how many meters?
Have you got this one? It shows the height there and then the shorter there.
I do have that picture actually.
Yeah, that's what that'll help.
So this is the existing fence that's on the west.
That's the one we're talking about, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I generally don't like corner properties with side fences, but as I look at just Leslie in general, there's basically a wall of tall fences from. Stucco. Is that going to be stucco?
Yes, that's the proposal. That it's going to be a wooden fence, but with a skin of stucco on it.
Sorry, Shelley. Can you repeat your answer?
Yeah, it is. The proposal is for a wooden constructed fence, but to be finished with stucco. There is a drawing in the package. This one again?
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the proposal.
So is what's allowable the height of the fence on Bond?
Yes, that's correct. That is permitted height. That's 2 meters. And so the permissible height on the Leslie Street side of it would only be 1.2 meters.
Which is?
Significantly lower than both of those fences.
And
but the
bylaw allows for
1.2 meters.
Which is, can you kind of eyeball, like just give me a...
Very roughly, it's going to be in the region here.
Yeah. All right. So, thank you. I've finished.
Thank you.
I'm going to move to deferral of this so I can meet with the residents.
Oh, there it shows. It shows this.
All right.
Sorry, I'm going to move deferral till
September.
till September. I just want to have a chat with them, like, if, and they're not here. They are here.
Oh.
Well, I don't know, first of all, he hasn't asked to see deputy, so I'm gonna move deferral to September.
Okay, deferral is on the floor. All those in favor?
And I'm just gonna say that I generally don't like this. I generally don't like it, but I was gonna grant it because there's a sea of fences along Leslie, and so it kind of fits right in, but anyway, I wanna see if we can work something out with the residents.
Yeah. Fair enough. So it's deferral to the next regularly scheduled community council meeting,
So
which
he
is
just calls my office.
September. September 2019. All those in favor?
Thank you.
Opposed? That is carried. Item 49, change to parking prohibitions across frontage of Sloan Public School, 110 Sloan Avenue. Does everyone have the motion in front of you?
All those in favor? Opposed?
All those in favor? Any questions for staff? Any speakers? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried.
All right, everybody get out.
Madam Clerk, I think we're ready to go into private. Do we need a motion to go into private? Okay.
Which one's this one?
Excellent.
He did, he signed it.
Thanks. That the North York Community Council recess its public session to meet in closed session to consider item NY 7.35, application of a private tree at 45 Addison. The reason being that the report from the city solicitor contains advice or communications that are subject to solicitor client privilege. All those in favor?
All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Members of the public, media, and I believe staff that are not tied to this report. Yes, yes.
Just after this item?
Right, well, we're...
Yep. All right, just let me know, Nick, thanks. Pardon? We're just waiting for AV to clear with downtown.
This purple thing?
Yes.
So this is about the
tree, the walnut tree.
white walnuts, or what color walnuts are we talking?
Black walnuts.
Is there a difference, Mr. Chair?
One's white and one's black. Or one's black. This was deferred.
What about chestnut trees? Is there a ruling on those?
We have to wait for Nick. We have to wait.
No, you can't, the Canadian chestnuts you can't eat. Canadian chestnuts are not edible.
Nick, do you want me to email you?
Yes.
Okay.
Just pull it, they're not ready yet.
Okay.
No, that's a nice snack if you have the,
Oh, stop.
Dollarama sells those shelled chestnuts for, I think $1. You get a nice snack. high in fiber and they're no salt and they're organic. Dollarama is selling organic chestnuts. Instead of buying chocolate bars, I buy chestnuts.